The Nile is almost black before dawn, a slow band of moving darkness between banks of mud, reeds, and sleeping fields. Somewhere beyond the river, the desert waits in silence, pale under the last stars, as if it has been holding its breath for 5,000 years. A boat moves without hurry across the water, its oars dip softly. The smell of wet earth rises from the floodplain. In the distance, the first line of light touches the cliffs. And for a moment, Egypt seems less like a kingdom than a miracle repeated every morning: river, sun, field, life, death, and memory, all balanced on the edge of sand. This is where the old mystery begins, not with pyramids, gold masks, or curses, but with a landscape so strange and exact that it shaped nearly everything people believed. Ancient Egypt is often imagined as stone, but it is born from water. The country exists because the Nile cuts through one of the driest regions on earth, leaving a ribbon of green so narrow that a person can stand in a field of barley and see the desert rising nearby like a wall. To ancient eyes, this contrast is not simply beautiful. It is the structure of reality. On one side is cultivation, order, and the known world. On the other is heat, danger, wandering spirits, and the realm of endings. The Egyptians call this contrast in different ways across time, but the idea is steady: the black land of fertile silt and the red land of desert glare. Every year, for the river once rose in a great flood, spreading dark sediment across the fields. It did not arrive with perfect kindness, and scholars still debate the full human experience of bad flood years, because the written and archaeological record is uneven. Too little water means hunger, too much means destruction. But in ordinary years, the flood renews the soil without ploughs tearing deeply into exhausted ground. It gives Egypt something many ancient societies struggle to secure: a rhythm. Not certainty, exactly, but a pattern people can watch, measure, pray over, tax, and remember. The river's rise becomes time itself, the retreat of the water becomes labour, the sprouting of grain becomes hope, the harvest becomes survival. Long before Egypt becomes a state of kings and temples, it is already a civilization of waiting. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy. Because Egypt rewards patience. Its strangest facts are not always the loud ones. They hide in sleeping positions, broken sandals, boat timbers, insect bites, jars of beer, cracked teeth, unfinished tombs, desert tracks, and names scratched by workers who never expected anyone so far in the future to care. The Nile is not merely a river in Egyptian life, it is a corridor, a calendar, a road, a food source, and a boundary between worlds. Boats move people, grain, stone, soldiers, priests, letters, coffins, and gods. The current flows north, toward the Mediterranean, while the prevailing winds often help boats sail south. This creates a natural highway in both directions, one of the quiet advantages that helps Egypt hold together across long stretches of time. Yet even this unity is never as simple as it appears. Egypt is divided into regions, local traditions, nomes, powerful families, temple estates, and shifting centres of authority. What survives in the record suggests a civilization that loves order, but constantly works to maintain it against the pull of distance, ambition, drought, and time. The earliest communities along the Nile do not wake up one morning as ancient Egypt. They gather slowly out of older worlds. People hunt, fish, herd animals, cultivate grain, bury their dead, trade objects, and shape local identities long before the first pharaohs. In the deep background lies a changing Sahara, not always the endless dry expanse people imagine today. During wetter periods of prehistory, parts of North Africa hold lakes, grasses, animals, and human communities moving through landscapes that later become desert. As climate shifts, people concentrate more heavily along the Nile Valley. No single explanation fully accounts for the formation of Egyptian civilization, but environment, migration, farming, trade, and social competition all seem to play their parts. One of the sleepiest facts about ancient Egypt is that much of its grandeur begins with mud. The monumental stone world survives, so it dominates memory, but daily Egypt is made from sun-dried brick. Houses, walls, storage rooms, workspaces, and even palaces often rise from the river's own clay. Mud brick is practical, cool, repairable, and temporary in a way stone is not. It returns to dust, collapses, is rebuilt, and disappears beneath later occupation. This means the Egypt most people actually lived in has partly vanished, while the Egypt built for eternity remains. The imbalance can fool the eye. Tombs survive better than bedrooms. Temples outlast kitchens. Kings are easier to hear than farmers. And yet the farmers are everywhere, if one learns to notice them. They stand behind the tax records, the granaries, the offering scenes, the labour crews, the bread moulds, the worn tools, and the fields pressed between flood and desert. Their work supports a world that can afford scribes, priests, soldiers, artists, and royal tombs. Egypt's famous afterlife depends on very earthly accounting. Grain must be measured, beer must be brewed, linen must be woven, cattle must be counted. Workers must be fed. Even the most sacred monument has a logistics problem hiding beneath its mystery. At dawn, the first light does more than reveal the river. It restores cosmic order. The sun's daily return becomes one of the great patterns through which Egyptians understand existence. Night is not just darkness, it is a dangerous passage. The sun travels through hidden regions, faces threats, and emerges again. Sleep, too, carries a faint echo of this journey. A person lying still in darkness resembles the dead, yet expects to rise. This is one reason the boundary between sleep and death can feel unusually thin in Egyptian thought. The bed, the tomb, the western horizon, the dream, and the morning light are not identical, but they belong to the same family of images. The land itself teaches recurrence, flood and retreat, sowing and harvest, sunset and sunrise, birth and burial, decay and preservation. The Egyptians do not deny death. They organize around it, but this is not a civilization obsessed with death in the simple gloomy sense. It is a civilization intensely concerned with continuity. Names should survive, bodies should endure, offerings should continue, families should remember, the sun should rise, the Nile should return. The king should maintain order, the dead should not be abandoned to silence. Still, the evidence remains incomplete. For all the inscriptions, paintings, objects, tombs, and monuments, much of Egypt is lost. Voices disappear unevenly. The poor leave fewer words. Children appear in fragments. Women are visible and yet often filtered through male-controlled records. Villages may be known through rubbish heaps more than biographies. Even kings, surrounded by carved declarations, remain strangely distant. Ancient Egypt gives us abundance and absence at the same time. That is why the story has to begin with the river before it enters the tomb. The Nile is the first fact, the softest fact, and perhaps the most powerful. Without it, there is no black land, no harvest rhythm, no long corridor of boats, no temple economy, no pyramid age, no scribal state, no dream of eternity carved into stone. But with it, there is a world where people learn to see time as a cycle and survival as something negotiated daily with water, heat, gods, labour, and memory. As the morning brightens, the fields wake, birds lift from the reeds, a fisherman checks his net. Smoke rises from a village oven. Somewhere, a scribe prepares to count what the flood has made possible. Somewhere else, a body rests in a tomb built to face forever. Between them flows the same river, carrying silt, boats, prayers, taxes, rumours, and reflections of the sun. Egypt begins there, in the hush before the day fully opens, where the living world and the eternal world almost touch. When the light fades from the Nile Valley, ancient Egypt does not simply become dark, it becomes uncertain. The familiar fields lose their edges, the desert cools, insects begin their thin music, and the river turns from a road into a black surface that seems to hold the sky inside it. The day belongs to labour, heat, counting, trade, ceremonies, and visible order. Night belongs to quieter forces. It is the time of dreams, hidden movement, protective spells, restless fears, and the strange rehearsal of death that every sleeper performs without meaning to. For the Egyptians, sleep is practical before it is mystical. Bodies are tired, farmers rise early, bakers work before dawn, guards keep watch, mothers tend children, priests perform rituals according to schedules that do not always respect comfort. The climate shapes the rhythm of rest. In the heat of the day, shade matters. At night, coolness can be welcome, especially after the stored warmth of mud brick walls begins to soften. Ordinary people sleep in houses, courtyards, roof spaces, roof, or wherever the season and household allow. Beds exist. But not everyone has the same kind of bed, and the evidence remains incomplete because the sleeping places of the poor rarely survive with the dignity of royal furniture. The bed itself can be surprisingly simple: a wooden frame, woven matting, sometimes raised legs, sometimes elegant animal-shaped feet in wealthier contexts. The famous Egyptian headrest looks uncomfortable to modern eyes, a curved support lifted on a stem, designed not for softness but for holding the head off the ground. Yet it makes sense in a hot climate, where airflow, hair, wigs, insects, and posture all matter. Headrests also carry symbolic weight. Some are carved or inscribed for protection. The sleeping head is vulnerable, and in a culture where the head is strongly tied to identity, breath, and awareness, guarding it during the night is not a small concern. Sleep resembles death just enough to make people careful. A still body, closed eyes, a lowered awareness of the world. These are ordinary features of rest, but they echo the condition of the dead. Egyptian religion does not treat this resemblance lightly. The sun god's nightly journey through the underworld offers a cosmic version of sleep and renewal. Each evening, the sun disappears into danger. Each morning, it returns transformed. A human sleeper may not be the sun, but the pattern matters. To lie down is to enter a less darkness and trust that one will rise again. Dreams add another layer. Ancient Egyptians take dreams seriously, though not always in one simple way. Some dreams may be messages. Some may reveal divine favour, danger, illness, or hidden truth. Dream books survive from later periods, organising dream images into favourable and unfavourable signs, though scholars still debate how widely such texts were used and by whom. A dream of seeing oneself dead might be interpreted one way, a dream of eating certain foods another, a dream of looking into water another still. The logic can feel strange, but it belongs to a world where symbols connect daily life to divine patterns. This does not mean every Egyptian wakes in terror after every odd dream. People everywhere dream, forget, laugh, worry, and continue with their day. But in Egypt, the boundary between the seen and unseen is unusually crowded. Gods, ancestors, Demons, the blessed dead, hostile dead, protective spirits, and forces of disorder all have places in the imagination. Night is when these presences feel closer. The sleeping person is not working, speaking, or defending the body. Protection must be arranged in other ways. Amulets help, spells help, images help. A household may contain protective figures, charms, or ritual objects meant to guard against snakes, scorpions, illness, miscarriage, nightmares, or harmful beings. The dwarf god Bez, with his fierce face and compact body, becomes especially associated with domestic protection, childbirth, music, and sleep. His appearance can seem almost comic at first, but his role is serious. A frightening face can frighten what threatens the household. The goddess Taweret, part hippopotamus, part crocodile, part lion, watches over pregnancy and birth with the heavy power of animals known to be dangerous. Egyptian protection is not always delicate. Sometimes safety needs teeth. Children must have been especially vulnerable at night. The archaeological record preserves hints of concern amulets, protective imagery, spells, and the repeated human effort to guard young lives in a world of disease, infection, insects, and uncertain medicine. Many children didn't survive to adulthood. This is one of the facts that softens and darkens the entire civilization. Behind the polished statues and painted tombs are parents listening in the night for a child's breathing. What survives in the record suggests that love and fear lived close together, as they always have. Lamps extend the day, but only a little. Ancient Egyptian lamps are usually simple vessels with oil and a wick. Their light is small, smoky, and precious compared with the flood of modern illumination. Darkness remains real. It presses into corners. It hides pests. It changes the meaning of familiar rooms. A house at night is not a bright interior with decorative shadows. It is a fragile zone of human warmth within a much larger dark. And then there are the dead, who are not entirely gone. Tombs are often located in the west, where the sun sets, and the west becomes associated with the realm beyond life. But the dead also remain connected to the living through offerings, names, memory, and sometimes fear. A neglected dead person might become restless. A properly sustained one might become an effective spirit, able to help descendants. Letters to the dead show that Egyptians could appeal to deceased relatives for assistance in worldly troubles. These texts are deeply human. They reveal people trying to solve disputes, illnesses, and misfortunes by addressing family members who had crossed into another state of existence. Sleep, then, happens in a society where the invisible is not abstract. It is domestic. It enters the bedroom, the courtyard, the nursery, the dream. This gives Egyptian night its peculiar intimacy. The underworld may be vast and cosmic, but protection begins at the bed. Royal sleep adds another dimension, though even kings must close their eyes. Pharaoh may be divine in ideology, but the royal body still tires, ages, sweats, becomes ill, and needs guarded rest. Palace life includes attendants, officials, guards, and rituals that ordinary people never experience, yet the basic vulnerability remains. The king's sleep is politically important because the king's body is tied to the order of the land. A sick ruler, a dead ruler, a weak ruler, or a disputed succession can trouble the whole kingdom. Divine kingship does not abolish human biology, it disguises it beneath ceremony. The most haunting sleeping places are not in houses at all, but in tombs. Burial chambers are arranged as spaces of eternal rest, but that rest is active in Egyptian thought. The dead person needs preservation, equipment, food offerings, words, images, and ritual knowledge. Coffins become protective containers covered with eyes, spells, gods, and names. The mummy lies as if asleep, but this sleep is meant to be more than unconsciousness. It is a prepared condition from which the deceased can awaken into another form of life. No single explanation fully accounts for the Egyptian connection between sleep, death, and renewal, because it grows from several roots at once: the daily sunset, the annual flood, human dreaming, bodily stillness, ancestor veneration, and the desire to make loss reversible. The result is a civilization where going to sleep is never only going to sleep. It is a small descent into darkness, protected by household gods, watched by stars, echoing the sun's hidden journey beneath the world. Outside, the river continues moving. It does not sleep in the human way. It carries moonlight between the banks, slides past reeds and moored boats, and whispers against the mud. Inside the houses, people lie down on mats, beds, roofs, and floors. A child turns under a light covering. A worker's sore back settles into stillness. A woman dreams of a festival. A priest wakes before dawn for a ritual, somewhere in a tomb cut into the western cliffs. A painted pair of eyes faces outward from a coffin, as if the dead are waiting for morning too. Morning returns to the village before it reaches the monuments. It slips over low roofs, catches on the edges of reed mats, warms the mud brick walls, and finds the small things: first a clay jar near a doorway, a sleeping dog, a basket, a child's footprint hardened in yesterday's damp earth. This is the Egypt that stone does not preserve easily. It is not the Egypt of colossal statues staring across temple courts, but the Egypt of kitchens, courtyards, patched sandals, smoke, grain dust, and families measuring the day by heat, hunger, work, and water. Most Egyptians do not live among marble halls or painted palaces. They live in houses made largely from mud brick, formed from Nile clay, chopped straw, and sun. The material is ordinary, but it is also perfectly suited to the river world. It can be shaped quickly, dried in the fierce light, repaired when damaged, and replaced when time takes it back. Mud brick does not carry the glamour of granite, yet it is the true architecture of daily Egypt. The strange consequence is that the civilization's most common buildings are among its least visible today. Stone tombs survive, mud homes collapse, eternity leaves better ruins than ordinary life. A typical house changes by period, region, wealth, and need, so no single plan represents all of Egypt. Still, what survives in the records suggests common patterns, rooms arranged for storage, sleeping, cooking, work, and family life, sometimes with stairs leading to a roof, sometimes with a courtyard that becomes one of the most important spaces in the home. Roofs matter in hot climate. They are not merely covers but living surfaces. People may sleep there, dry produce there, work, or catch a little breeze after the day's heat has settled into the walls. A house is not divided from the environment in the modern sealed sense. Dust enters, smoke lingers, insects arrive without invitation. Light is limited, airflow is precious. Inside, furniture is often sparse by modern standards. There may be stools, chests, mats, jars, baskets, grinding stones, and low surfaces for work. Wealth changes the picture, of course. Elite households can own finer beds, decorated boxes, imported goods, carved chairs, and objects made to display status as much as serve a function. But even wealthy Egyptians live in a world where storage vessels dominate the domestic landscape. Jars are everywhere because everything needs keeping grain. Beer, oil, water, lentils, dried fish, cosmetics, resins, medicines, and offerings. A household is partly a system of containers. The smell of an Egyptian home must have been layered and alive. Baking bread, brewing beer, damp clay, linen, sweat, animal dung used as fuel, smoke from cooking fires, fish, onions, garlic, oil, and the faint mineral odour of dust. Some of this is comforting, some harsh. The kitchen is not a separate modern appliance-filled room, but a working zone shaped by fire, clay ovens, grinding, kneading, and storage. Bread and beer are not luxuries, they are foundations. The daily making of food is repetitive, physical, and essential, and much of it falls to women, though the exact division of labour varies and the evidence remains incomplete. Grinding grain is one of the great hidden labours of the ancient world. It is slow, hard work, often done with stone tools that leave traces not only in archaeological finds but in human bodies. Egyptian bread can contain grit from grinding stones, windblown sand, and the rough conditions of preparation. Over a lifetime, this wears teeth down dramatically. Dental wear is one of those quiet facts that makes the past suddenly physical. Ancient bread is not a soft slice from a modern kitchen. It is survival with a mineral edge. Children grow up inside this dense domestic world. They learn by watching and helping. They play with simple toys, imitate adults, chase animals, carry small things, and live close to risk, illness, infection, accidents, parasites, and poor harvests are not distant possibilities. They are part of the background. Still, daily life is not only hardship. People decorate themselves. They sing, feast, gossip, joke, visit, mourn, and celebrate. Cosmetics are not merely vanity. Kohl around the eyes may carry aesthetic, protective, and possibly practical associations, though scholars still debate the full range of its uses across classes and periods. Wigs, linen garments, beads, perfumes, and ointments show a society attentive to appearance, scent, and presentation. Heat shapes clothing. Linen, made from flax, is the preferred textile, light and breathable. Many garments are simple in cut, but simplicity does not mean carelessness. Fine linen can be a mark of wealth and refinement. Laundry is labour. Cloth must be washed, dried, folded, stored, reused, and sometimes offered to temples or the dead. Sandals exist, often made from plant fibre or leather, but many people go barefoot much of the time. Feet know the texture of packed mud, hot dust, reed mats. Boat planks, field edges. Animals move through the household environment. Dogs, cats, donkeys, cattle, goats, ducks, geese, and insects occupy different places in human life. Cats become famous later for their religious associations, but at home their value is also practical. Grain attracts rodents. Rodents attract snakes. A cat in or near the storage area is not simply charming, it is part of the household's defence system. Dogs guard, hunt, and accompany. Donkeys carry loads and make trade possible at a human scale. Animals are wealth, tools, companions, offerings, symbols, and sometimes threats. The line between house and workshop can be thin. People spin thread, weave, repair tools, make baskets, prepare food, brew, store goods, and manage small production within or near the home. In planned workmen's villages, such as the famous settlement connected with royal tomb builders at Deir el-Medina, archaeology offers unusually rich glimpses into domestic space, quarrels, supplies, religious practice, and family life. But it would be a mistake to treat one exceptional village as all of Egypt. Its survival is precious precisely because so many ordinary settlements are lost beneath later occupation. Cultivation, erosion, or the patient recycling of mud brick into earth. One lesser-known detail is how much administrative life reaches into the home. Egypt's grand state depends on counting, and counting eventually touches households. Grain, labour, livestock, land, textiles, and taxes can all become matters of record. A family may experience the state not as an abstract kingdom but as a demand produce, labour, delivery, obligation. The scribe's marks on papyrus or ostraca connect the kitchen jar to the royal storehouse, the field to the temple, the worker's ration to the king's monument. Behind every official record is someone's day made heavier. Yet domestic religion softens and complicates that burden. Formal temple religion is dominated by priests, rituals, and restricted sacred spaces, but household religion is more intimate. People seek protection in childbirth, healing from illness, help with fertility, safety from bites, comfort from ancestors, and ordinary luck. A small figure, an amulet, a painted image, or a whispered spell may matter more to a household at midnight than a distant temple festival. The gods of the home are close because the dangers are close. As evening comes, the house changes again. Work slows, though it never fully disappears. Food is shared, jars are sealed, animals settle, a lamp may burn for a while, its small flame making the walls breathe with shadow. Someone climbs to the roof for cooler air, someone checks a child, someone stores bread for morning. Across the river valley, thousands of houses do the same, each one fragile, temporary, and mostly destined to vanish. And this is one of Egypt's deepest surprises. The civilization that promises eternity is built every day from materials that do not last. Mud walls crack, mats fray, bread goes stale, bodies tire, roofs need repair, children outgrow clothes, jars break. A family's life may leave only a scatter of pottery, ash, bones, beads, and impressions in hardened earth. But without these houses of mud and breath, there is no Egypt of stone. The pyramids rise from villages, and the tomb texts depend on bakers. The golden mast depends on farmers, eternity, in the end, as a household economy. The king appears in Egyptian art as something more than a man. He strides larger than everyone around him, raises a mace above defeated enemies, offers incense to gods, wears crowns that gather the country into symbols, and stands in stone with a calm that looks almost impossible. His face is composed, his body is ideal, his name is enclosed in royal rings as if protected from ordinary time. To approach Pharaoh through monuments alone is to meet a being made of ceremony, power, and perfect stillness. But somewhere behind that stillness is skin. The royal body sweats under linen and gold. It grows hungry. It develops tooth pain, fever, fatigue, wounds, and age. It sleeps, wakes, limps, mourns, desires, and dies. Divine kingship is one of Egypt's most powerful ideas, but it never frees the king from the most stubborn fact in history. A ruler may be treated as a god and still have a very human spine. This tension gives Egyptian kingship much of its strange force. Pharaoh is supposed to hold the world in order, yet he must do so from inside a body that can fail. The king's role is cosmic before it is administrative. He maintains Ma'at, the principle often translated as truth, balance, justice, order, and right arrangement, though no single English word fully carries it. Ma'at is the opposite of chaos, falsehood, violence, famine, invasion, and disorder. In royal ideology, Pharaoh is the one who offers meat to the gods and receives legitimacy in return. The Nile's rhythm, temple rites, military victories, law, harvest. And social hierarchy all become part of this vision. It is a brilliant political theology because it makes rule feel woven into the structure of existence. To disobey the king is not merely to resist a person, it is to disturb the order of the world. Yet the evidence shows that kingship is never as effortless as its images suggest. Egypt has powerful kings, weak kings, child kings, elderly kings, disputed successions, foreign rulers, co-regencies, palace intrigues, assassinations, and periods when central authority breaks apart. The monuments speak in the language of control because control is what they are trying to project. A temple wall showing Pharaoh smiting enemies does not mean Egypt is free from danger. Often it means danger is being ritually contained in stone. The royal court is a machine of proximity. Officials, scribes, priests, military leaders, attendants, queens, royal children, tutors, physicians, hairdressers, fan bearers, seal bearers, treasurers, and servants all orbit the king. Access is power. To stand near Pharaoh, to carry his sandals, to dress him, to record his words, to manage his estates, to supervise his building works can be a path to immense influence. Some titles sound humble to modern ears but carry deep prestige because they signal closeness to the sacred centre. The man who handles the king's linen may know more about the real body of power than the man who sees only statues. Royal clothing is part of the performance. Crowns mark different aspects of rule. Upper Egypt, Lower Egypt, unity, war, ritual, the false beard, the kilt, the tail, the uraeus cobra at the brow, the crook and flail, all help transform the body into a sign. The king is costumed into permanence. But those objects also remind us that divine power has to be dressed every day. It has to be applied, tied, placed, fastened, renewed. Ceremony is labour hidden beneath splendour. Some pharaohs are known in unusually human flashes. Akhenaten changes religion and art in ways that still provoke debate, appearing in images with an elongated face, narrow limbs, swelling belly, and intimate family scenes under the rays of the Atennin. Scholars still debate how much of this reflects physical reality, artistic theology, political messaging, or all of these at once. Tutankhamun, famous because his tomb survived with extraordinary richness, becomes more poignant when seen not only as a golden mask but as a young ruler whose body shows health problems and whose reign ends early. Rameses II projects overwhelming power, fathers many children, builds on a colossal scale, and lives long enough for age itself to become part of his legend. Yet his mummy reminds us that even the most monumental king ends as a preserved human body with white hair and worn features. The royal family is not a peaceful household enlarged into grandeur. It is a dynastic system under pressure. Marriages create alliances, secure succession, concentrate bloodlines, and display legitimacy. Royal women can wield enormous influence, especially as mothers of kings, great royal wives, regents, priestesses, and occasionally rulers in their own right. But the record is uneven and often shaped by male royal presentation. A queen may be highly visible in one reign and almost vanish in another. Power at court leaves traces, but not always explanations. Succession is one of the most dangerous moments in any monarchy. Egypt's ideology emphasizes continuity, yet each death creates uncertainty. A king's burial must be arranged, the next ruler must be recognized, rituals must be performed, officials must adjust loyalties, and enemies may test the borders. The system wants the transition to look seamless, like sunrise after sunset. Reality can be messier. The evidence remains incomplete for many reigns. And scholars still debate the details of particular successions, especially where inscriptions are damaged, names are erased, or later rulers reshape memory. Erasure itself is one of the most chilling tools of Egyptian politics. To remove a name or image is not only vandalism in the modern sense, it can be an attack on existence after death. Since the name helps sustain identity, damaging it threatens memory, offerings, and eternity. Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's most successful female pharaohs, later has many of her images and names attacked, though the reasons and timing are still debated. Akhenaten's religious revolution is followed by a restoration that treats his memory and city as dangerous deviations. In Egypt, political failure can become a war against the afterlife. The king's health matters because the country's order is imagined through him. Royal bodies are therefore protected, treated, decorated, and finally preserved with exceptional care. Physicians may serve the court. Ritual specialists guard against unseen threats. Food, perfumes, oils, linen, and controlled spaces separate the king from ordinary exposure, though not completely. Ancient medicine can treat wounds, set bones, prepare remedies, and recognize symptoms. But it cannot overcome all infection, genetic illness, epidemic disease, or the slow destruction of time. Divine kings die like everyone else. The difference is the scale of the arrangements made afterward. A pharaoh's burial is a final act of statecraft. Tombs, coffins, canopic equipment, funerary texts, statues, jewellery, food offerings, ritual objects, and sealed chambers all work together to continue royal power beyond death. The tomb is not only a grave, it is a machine for transformation, but this machine attracts danger. Tomb robbery is ancient, not modern. Many royal burials are disturbed, stripped, reused, hidden, or moved. The priests who later reburied some royal mummies and caches were not thinking about museum visitors. They were trying to rescue sacred bodies from a world where eternity had become insecure. This is the quiet irony of Pharaoh. The king is presented as eternal, but his survival depends on people. Craftsmen must carve the tomb, priests must perform rites, officials must protect goods, successors must honour the name, guards must keep robbers away, descendants must maintain offerings. Even a divine king needs a functioning society after death. When that society weakens, the royal afterlife becomes vulnerable. And so the monuments begin to look different. The colossal statue is not only arrogance, it is anxiety made durable. The royal titulary is not only praise, it is a defence against forgetting. The perfect carved body is not only ideal beauty, it is a correction of the real body which can ache, decay, and disappear. Pharaoh stands between heaven and earth, but he does so with human bones. As the day ends in the palace, attendants withdraw, lamps are lit, and the king who has appeared as Horus before the world becomes again a person, enclosed by walls, guarded doors, and private weakness. Outside, the Nile keeps moving past villages and fields. Inside, the body of power rests. It may dream, it may hurt, it may wake before dawn to become divine again. Long before the pyramid becomes a shape on the horizon, it's a problem in human bodies. Stone must be cut, dragged, lifted, counted, fitted, and fed into place by hands that blister and backs that ache. Bread has to be baked before sunrise. Beer has to be brewed in quantities large enough to keep crews alive. Copper tools need repair, sledges need rope, ramps, roads, workyards, and harbours need organisation. The monument rises slowly, but the hunger of the workers arrives every day. For a long time, popular imagination filled this scene with chained slaves groaning under whips. The image is powerful, but it is too simple and largely unsupported for the great pyramid-building periods. What survives in the record suggests something more complex. Large labour forces made up of skilled specialists, rotating crews, state-organised workers, seasonal labour, administrators, bakers, brewers, haulers, quarrymen, and craftsmen operating within an economy of obligation rather than a single picture of mass enslavement. Coercion may still exist in forms familiar to ancient states. People do not always choose royal labour freely, but the pyramid workforce is not best understood as a faceless crowd of foreign slaves. It is an Egyptian labour system, disciplined, supplied, named, and remembered in traces. The workers leave marks, and these marks change the story. In hidden spaces and work areas, crew names appear, sometimes with humour or pride. Groups identify themselves with names connected to the king, almost like teams. Such graffiti was not meant for tourists or temple visitors. It was practical, casual, and human. It tells us that the builders were not invisible to themselves. They belonged to organised gangs and files, with internal divisions and supervisors. A stone block might carry a mark showing where it should go or which crew handled it. The pyramid is not only geometry, it is paperwork in limestone. At Giza, the workers' settlement helps bring the whole machine down to earth. Archaeology reveals bakeries, breweries, fish bones, cattle bones, storage areas, barracks or galleries, administrative spaces, and evidence of large-scale provisioning. Feeding workers at this scale requires serious planning. The royal project consumes not only stone but cattle, grain, fuel, pottery, water, and labour from across a wide landscape. Every polished casing block has a shadow made of food logistics. Someone must slaughter animals, grind grain, bake loaves, brew beer, carry jars, track rations, and clean up the remains. The diet of pyramid workers appears to have included bread, beer, fish, and in some contexts significant quantities of meat, especially beef, sheep, and goat. Meat is not distributed equally across all ancient society, so its presence in work contexts matters. It suggests that at least some crews were well provisioned, possibly because demanding labour required calories, and because feeding workers properly was part of maintaining productivity and loyalty. The evidence remains incomplete, and conditions surely varied by role, season, and status. But the old image of starving slaves under constant punishment does not fit the archaeological picture very well. Their bodies tell the harder part. Skeletons associated with labour communities show signs of physical stress, healed fractures, joint wear, and injuries consistent with heavy work. Some injuries appear treated, and some individuals survive long enough for bones to heal. This does not make the work gentle. It means the workers were valuable enough to receive care, or at least to remain within a social system where recovery was possible. A man with a damaged limb. A woman involved in production work. A young labourer with a strained spine. These are the human costs beneath royal eternity. The work is specialised. Quarrymen understand stone. Haulers understand teams, sledges, friction, rhythm, and rope. Masons shape blocks. Surveyors measure. Scribes record. Potters produce containers. Carpenters build sledges, levers, scaffolding, boats, and tools. Metalworkers maintain copper chisels, which must be sharpened constantly when used against hard stone. Water carriers make work possible in punishing heat. Cooks and brewers are as essential as engineers. A monument fails if its food system fails. One lesser-known detail is how much ancient Egyptian work depends on sound and timing. Large crews pulling a heavy stone need coordination. Even without preserved songs from every worksite, it is easy to understand why rhythm matters. A pull must become collective. The rope tightens, bodies lean, a leader calls, and the load moves a little. Modern experiments show that sledges can move more efficiently when surfaces are prepared. And some Egyptian imagery suggests water may have been poured before sledges to reduce friction. Scholars still debate the full range of methods used in different settings, but the basic truth is clear. Stone moves when human bodies become a coordinated machine. Scribes stand at the edge of this machine with pallets and authority. They count rations, personnel, deliveries, tools, absences, and output. Literacy is limited, so the scribe occupies a privileged place. He does not merely write things down. He transforms labour into state knowledge. If a crew is short of men, if grain is missing, if stone delivery falls behind, if workers complain, the administrative system needs marks to see the problem. The pyramid age depends on muscle. But it also depends on ink. Not all monumental labour is pyramid labour. Egypt's long history includes temples, tombs, canals, roads, fortresses, statues, obelisks, and royal cities. The workmen of Deir el-Medina, who cut and decorated royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings, are among the best-known non-pyramid labour communities because their village preserves a remarkable record of daily life. They are skilled workers, not anonymous slaves, and their documents reveal rations, disputes, family matters, religious practices, and even work stoppages. The famous labour strike under Ramesses III, driven by delayed rations, is a reminder that workers who build eternity still need grain on time. This is one of ancient Egypt's most grounding facts. The builders of sacred monuments can complain about supplies. They can miss work. They can suffer illness. They can negotiate. They can leave behind laundry lists, jokes, legal disputes, and prayers. The people who carve the afterlife are also dealing with donkeys, debts, jealousies, and aching knees. The relationship between workers and the state is therefore neither romantic nor purely brutal. It is structured by hierarchy, obligation, skill, dependence, and reward. Some workers receive rations and housing. Some gain status through association with royal projects. Some are compelled by tax-like labour duties. Some are specialists with pride in their craft. No single explanation fully accounts for all Egyptian labour across 3,000 years, and the balance changes from kingdom to kingdom, project to project, but the evidence pushes us toward complexity. The monuments themselves encourage misunderstanding because they hide process. A finished pyramid looks silent, inevitable, almost geological. It does not show the temporary ramps that may have been dismantled, the workers' meals, the broken tools, the overseer's frustration, the injured hauler, the argument over missing grain, the boy carrying water, or the baker covered in flour. Stone survives, effort evaporates. Archaeology has to recover effort from scraps. At sunset, the construction site changes character, heat leaves the stone slowly, crews return to settlements, fires are lit, bread is divided, beer jars are opened, tools are stored or repaired, the pyramid, unfinished, waits in the dimming light. Its lines are not yet perfect, its casing may not yet shine. Around it lies the temporary world that makes permanence possible: huts, ramps, debris, ropes, sledges, bones, ash, broken pottery, exhausted people. The next morning, the work begins again. A scribe counts, a crew gathers, a stone shifts. Someone jokes, someone curses, someone bleeds into the dust and keeps pulling. Thousands of such moments disappear into one clean silhouette against the sky. That is the real mystery of Egypt's monuments, not that impossible beings built them, but that ordinary human beings, organised with extraordinary ambition, did. The pyramid does not explain itself. It stands there with a confidence that almost feels impolite, as if a mountain has learned geometry and refuses to say how. From a distance, its shape seems simple enough: four sides, a square base, a point aimed at the sky, but the closer one comes, the more the simplicity breaks apart. The pyramid becomes measurement, labour, astronomy, stone quality, slope, transport, administration, belief, and thousands upon thousands of decisions made with tools that look almost modest beside the result. The Great Pyramid of Khufu is the most famous example, but it belongs to a longer experiment in royal eternity. Egypt does not begin with perfect pyramids, it learns them. Earlier royal tombs developed from mastabas, low rectangular structures whose form already suggests a desire to mark and protect the dead king. Joseph's step pyramid at Saqqara, associated with the architect Imhotep, rises like stacked mastabas turned into a stairway of stone. Later builders experiment with angles and ambition. The bent pyramid changes slope partway up, perhaps because of structural concerns, though scholars still debate the exact reason. The red pyramid moves closer to the smooth-sided form that becomes iconic. By the time the Giza pyramids dominate the plateau, Egypt has already spent generations turning burial into engineering. The first quiet surprise is precision. Pyramid bases can be aligned with remarkable care to the cardinal directions. This does not require alien knowledge, lost machines, or unsupported theories. Ancient Egyptians are attentive skywatchers. The circumpolar stars, the sun's path, shadows, sighting tools, chords, and repeated observations can all contribute to orientation. The exact methods remain debated because the builders did not leave a complete instruction manual. Yet the achievement fits comfortably within what is known of Egyptian surveying skill. A civilization that taxes land after floods must care deeply about measurement. Levelling the site is another problem hidden beneath the pyramid's clean outline. A massive base cannot simply be placed on uneven bedrock without consequences. Builders use natural rock where possible, cut and prepare surfaces, and adapt the monument to the plateau. The pyramid is not a stack of identical blocks on a perfectly empty table. It is partly negotiated with the ground itself. Some internal bedrock may be incorporated into the mass, which means the monument is both built and carved out of its landscape in subtle ways. Then comes the stone. Much of the core limestone is quarried locally near the pyramid, reducing transport distance for the largest volume of material. Finer white casing stones come from Tura across the Nile, and granite used in inner chambers comes from far to the south at Aswan. This creates a map of Egypt inside a single monument. Local limestone forms the bulk, fine limestone gives brilliance, granite adds strength and prestige. The pyramid is a royal body made from the country's geology. Transport is where imagination often runs wild. Huge stones must move from quarries to the site, sometimes by boat, sometimes by sledges, sometimes across prepared roads. Reliefs from later contexts show colossal objects dragged on sledges by teams of men, with a figure pouring liquid before the runners, possibly to reduce friction. This is not proof for every pyramid method in every detail, but it shows that Egyptians understood practical ways to move heavy loads. The Nile again becomes essential. Stone is easier to move by water than across long dry distances. A pyramid is therefore not only a desert monument, it is a river project. Ramps are the great unresolved image. Most scholars agree that some form of ramp system must have been used, but the exact design remains debated. Straight ramps, zigzag ramps, spiral ramps, internal ramps, combined systems, levering techniques, and changing strategies at different building stages have all been proposed. No single explanation fully accounts for every problem, especially near the upper levels where space, gradient, and maneuvering become difficult. The evidence remains incomplete because ramps are temporary architecture. They are meant to disappear after they have done their work. The missing ramp is not necessarily a mystery in the sensational sense. It is what happens when the most important tool is dismantled, The tools are simple but not crude. Copper chisels, dolerite pounders, wooden mallets, stone hammers, ropes, levers, sledges, plumb bobs, set squares, measuring rods, and levelling instruments can do extraordinary things when used by skilled workers under organised supervision. Modern people often underestimate ancient skill because they confuse technological simplicity with intellectual simplicity. A copper tool is not a laser, but a trained mason with generations of inherited knowledge can make stone obey. Inside the pyramid, the mood changes. The exterior belongs to the sun and horizon, the interior belongs to pressure, silence, and the dead king's transformation. Passages slope through darkness, chambers are placed with care. Relieving spaces above the king's chamber distribute weight in ways that show practical engineering intelligence. The so-called air shafts, whose function remains debated, may have symbolic or ritual meaning connected with stars or the king's celestial journey. Though certainty is difficult, the pyramid's inside is not a house in the normal sense. It is a sealed ritual landscape, built to protect and transform a body that may not have remained protected for long. The burial chamber itself is almost austere compared with later royal tombs. This can surprise people expecting walls crowded with spells and paintings. Pyramid texts appear later in royal pyramids, beginning in the late 5th dynasty, not in Khufu's Great Pyramid. Their absence reminds us that Egyptian funerary religion changes over time. The idea of the king's ascent, rebirth, and union with divine powers is old, but its written expression develops. Egypt is traditional, but not frozen. The outer casing once transformed the pyramid completely. Today many pyramids look stepped and rough because casing stones were removed over centuries for reuse. In their original state, the finest pyramids could gleam with smooth white limestone, catching the sun in ways that made the monument seem almost luminous. The pyramid on the horizon was not meant to look like an eroded ruin. It was a controlled blaze of royal permanence. At the top, a pyramidion may have been sheathed or finished in a way that caught light even more sharply. The whole form becomes a frozen sunbeam, a stairway, a mound of creation, a royal horizon, depending on which layer of meaning one follows. Meaning matters because engineering alone does not explain why anyone would organise such labour. The pyramid is tied to kingship, death, rebirth, solar religion, the primeval mound emerging from waters, and the cosmic position of the ruler. Scholars still debate the balance of these meanings in different periods, but the basic point is clear: this is not a giant stone puzzle built for spectacle alone. It is a sacred machine built from state power. One lesser-known fact is that pyramid complexes are much larger than the pyramid itself. There are mortuary temples, valley temples, causeways, subsidiary pyramids, boat pits, enclosure walls, cemeteries, and associated settlements. The pyramid is the visible summit of a ritual and administrative landscape. Priests must maintain the king's cult after burial. Offerings must be delivered. Estates may be assigned to support ceremonies. The dead king remains economically active, consuming resources through his memory. And yet, for all this planning, most pyramids are eventually violated. Robbers tunnel, pry, break, strip, and search. Later builders reuse stone, earthquakes, weather, politics, and neglect alter the sites. Eternity has enemies, and some of them are very practical. The pyramid promises permanence, but permanence requires protection across centuries, and no state remains equally strong forever. Standing at the base, one feels the strange double truth. The pyramid is not impossible. It is explainable through human labour, mathematics, administration, astronomy, materials, and religious purpose. But explainable does not mean diminished. If anything, the human explanation is more astonishing. The stones do not float into place by magic. They arrive through planning, hunger, sweat, injury, pride, command, skill, and the calm violence of organised time. As the sun lowers, the pyramid's face changes colour. Shadows reveal courses of stone that midday light flattens. The monument becomes less like a diagram and more like a memory of motion stopped. Every block was once moving. Every smooth line was once a rough problem. Every silent chamber was once filled with sound. Pyramid keeps its secrets not because Egypt had no answers, but because the work that made it possible was temporary, human, and mostly swept away after the king was sealed inside. The embalmer's workshop is not a place of quiet marble beauty. It is a place of linen, salt, oil, resin, knives, jars, sawdust, natron, human grief, and practiced hands. The body arrives because a life has ended, but the work begins because the Egyptians are not willing to let the body become only ruin. Death is real. Decay is real. The desert can preserve by accident, but civilization wants preservation by design. Mummification is the long answer to a terrifyingly simple problem. How can a person continue if the body disappears? The earliest Egyptian burials did not begin with elaborate embalming. Bodies placed in shallow desert graves could dry naturally in the hot sand, producing preservation without a full artificial process. Over time, as burials become more complex and bodies are placed in coffins or tomb chambers away from direct contact with drying sand, natural preservation becomes less reliable. The living respond with technique. They learn, experiment, fail, refine, and ritualize. By the height of Egyptian embalming practice, the dead body is no longer simply buried, it is transformed. The process varies by period, wealth, status, and local custom, so there is no single mummy-making recipe for all of ancient Egypt. Still, a general pattern is known. Internal organs may be removed, dried, wrapped, and stored, often in canopic jars or packages associated with protective deities. The brain is sometimes removed through the nose, though not always with the neatness modern imagination prefers. The body is treated with natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture that dries the tissues. Oils, resins, perfumes, and wrappings follow. Amulets may be placed among the linen layers. The goal is not merely to stop decay, but to remake the body into a durable, ritually protected form suitable for the afterlife. One of the stranger facts is that mummification is both careful and imperfect. Embalmers know a great deal from practice, but their work is not modern anatomy. Organs may be removed with skill or left in place. Bodies may be packed to restore shape. Artificial eyes, padding, resin, and cosmetic treatment may help create the appearance of wholeness. Mistakes happen. Limbs can be damaged. Bodies can be mixed, rewrapped, repaired, or restored in later periods. Some mummies show evidence of ancient handling that is less reverent than the ideal texts imply. What survives in the record suggests a sacred craft carried out by humans, and humans are never as flawless as ritual demands. The preserved body matters because Egyptian personhood is complex. A person is not only flesh, there is the name, the shadow, the heart, the ka, the bear, and other aspects that do not map easily onto modern categories. But the body remains central. It gives the returning bear a place to recognise. It anchors identity. It allows transformation without total dispersal. The mummy is therefore not a corpse in the ordinary sense. It is a prepared vessel for continued existence. The heart receives special attention. In many Egyptian beliefs, it is the seat of thought, memory, intention, and moral life. In funerary judgment scenes, the heart is weighed against the feather of Mat. A heart too heavy with wrongdoing faces danger. This is why heart scarabs may be placed with the dead, sometimes inscribed with words meant to prevent the heart from testifying against its owner. The detail is quietly unsettling. The Egyptians imagine not only judgment, but the possibility that one's own heart knows too much. Medicine in Egypt lives near this same border between practical observation and sacred power. Egyptian medical texts show remedies, diagnoses, treatments, and categories of illness. Some are impressively rational in tone, especially when dealing with wounds as fractures or visible injuries. A physician may examine, describe, and decide whether a condition can be treated, contended with, or not treated. Other cases involve spells, divine forces, demons, or magical ingredients. To modern eyes, this looks like contradiction. To Egyptians, it is a broader map of causation. A wound may need honey and linen. A fever may also need protection from unseen forces. No single explanation fully accounts for suffering. Some treatments are strikingly practical. Honey, with antimicrobial properties, appears in wound care. Linen bandaging, splints, and surgical stitching show experience with injury. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, though known from a later copy, preserves a surgical tradition that classifies trauma with remarkable clarity. It does not turn ancient Egypt into a modern hospital, but it does show careful observation, broken bones, skull injuries, dislocations, and wounds are approached with an intention that feels sober and direct. Other remedies are stranger. Ingredients may include plant substances, minerals, animal products, milk, beer, oils, fats, and substances that modern patients would prefer not to discuss. Some prescriptions combine pharmacological possibility with symbolic logic. The evidence remains incomplete because many ingredients are difficult to identify with certainty, and texts may preserve elite or Scrabble traditions rather than everyday village practice. Still, the medical world is clearly busy. Egyptians are not passively waiting for gods to decide their fate. They treat, bind, pray, measure, chant, and try again. Dental disease is common, and this is one of the least glamorous facts about ancient Egypt. Teeth wear down from gritty bread, abscesses form, gums suffer, jawbones preserve pain long after voices vanish. Elite diets may include sweets such as dates and honey, which bring their own dental problems, while ordinary grain preparation contributes abrasive particles. There is evidence for attempts at dental treatment, but ancient dentistry is limited. A person can own amulets, linen, cosmetics, and religious texts, yet still be tormented by a tooth. Parasites and infectious diseases also haunt the Nile Valley. Living close to irrigation water, animals, insects, and dense settlements brings risks. Some mummies and skeletal remains show signs of conditions that scholars continue to study, including parasitic infections and evidence of chronic disease, bilharzia, malaria, tuberculosis, and other illnesses are often discussed in relation to ancient Egyptian health. Though diagnosis from ancient remains can be difficult and must be made carefully, the romantic image of Egypt fades quickly when one remembers flies, contaminated water, inflamed skin, and bodies weakened by repeated infection. Even royalty is not spared. Mummies of kings and elites show arthritis, dental wear, fractures, vascular disease, and other conditions. CT scanning and modern scientific methods have revealed details that earlier unwrapping damaged or missed. Yet even these technologies have limits. Scholars still debate causes of death in famous individuals because ancient bodies rarely offer a perfect answer. A broken bone, an infection, genetic condition, malaria evidence, trauma. Or poor health may suggest a story, but not always close the case. The dead keep some privacy. Childbirth may be one of the most dangerous medical thresholds. Pregnancy and delivery carry risks for mother and child, and protective magic surrounds them for a reason. Tawaret, bez, birth bricks, amulets, and household rituals speak to fear as much as faith. Women's reproductive health is visible in medical texts, but again, through records shaped by scribes and survival. Behind each formula is an experience that may include hope, pain, blood, waiting, and sometimes grief. The line between magician and physician is not always sharp. A healer may use a remedy and a spell together. Words themselves have power. Images have power. Names have power. The body is physical, but it is also vulnerable to forces that cannot be cut out with a knife. This makes Egyptian medicine feel alien and familiar at once. Modern people also bring fear, ritual, trust, and hope into sick rooms, even when the tools are different. After embalming, the mummy is wrapped not only in linen but in layers of intention. Every bandage, amulet, resin coating, mask, and inscription tries to secure the body against failure. But failure remains possible. Tombs are robbed, mummies burn, bodies are broken, names are lost, museums unwrap, time stains linen brown. The Egyptian struggle against decay is heroic precisely because decay never stops pressing back. In the workshop, the final form of the dead person emerges slowly. The face may be covered, the limbs are bound, the smell of resin replaces the smell of mortality. Priests speak words of transformation. Family grief is drawn into ritual order. What began as a body becomes an ancestor, an equipped traveller, a being prepared for judgment and return. Yet beneath the sacred wrapping is still a human being who once coughed, chewed gritty bread, feared fever, slept under a roof, and felt the body's ordinary betrayals. Mummification does not erase that humanity. It preserves it in the strangest way. The Egyptians wanted eternity, but what they left us is also evidence of pain, worn teeth, healed fractures, infected bones, careful bandages, and the stubborn tenderness of a civilization that looked at death and decided to make a craft out of resistance. The animals of ancient Egypt do not stay politely in the background. They stalk through fields, sleep in doorways, rise from marshes, coil in houses, cry above temples, and stare from the walls of tombs with the calm importance of beings who are never merely decorative. A cat beneath a chair, a falcon above a king's head, a crocodile in the river, a bull led in procession, an ibis wrapped as a mummy, a jackal watching the desert edge. Each belongs to a world where human life is surrounded by other forms of power. Egyptian religion is often described as animal-headed, but that phrase can mislead. The Egyptians do not simply worship animals in the modern childish sense of mistaking beasts for gods. Instead, animals reveal divine qualities. A falcon's height and sharp vision suit Horus, a jackal's presence near desert burial grounds suits Anubis, a lioness's violence suits Sekhmet, a cow's nourishment suits Hathor, a crocodile's terrifying command of water suits Sobek. These associations are not random costumes. They come from close attention to animal behaviour in a landscape where survival depends on noticing what animals do. The Nile makes this unavoidable. Its marshes hold fish, birds, hippopotamuses, crocodiles, insects, and plants that feed and threaten people. The desert holds gazelles, hares, scorpions, snakes, lions in earlier periods, jackals, and creatures that appear at the border of settlement like messengers from another world. Domestic animals fill the village's cattle, sheep, goats, pigs in some contexts, donkeys, dogs, cats, ducks, geese, and pigeons. Humans share space with animals constantly, and that closeness becomes practical, symbolic, and sacred all at once. Cats are the most famous, partly because later imagination cannot resist them. They are indeed important, but their story is more layered than simple adoration. Cats help protect grain stores by hunting rodents, and rodents attract snakes, so a cat's quiet work has direct economic value. Over time, cats become strongly associated with Bastet, a goddess whose nature shifts across periods from lioness-like ferocity toward more domestic protection, fertility, music, and pleasure. The cat in Egyptian life is therefore both household presence and sacred sign. It curls near the home, but it also belongs to a larger symbolic system of protection. Dogs, less glamorized today, are deeply present too. They hunt, guard, accompany, and appear in burials and names. Some Egyptians clearly care for individual animals. Pet burials suggest affection, though the evidence remains uneven and often belongs to people with enough resources to preserve such relationships. A dog may be a working animal, a companion, a status marker, or all three. In a world without modern locks, alarms, or streetlights, a good dog is more than sentimental comfort. It's part of the household's boundary. Cattle carry wealth, food, labour, and divine meaning. The Apis bull, associated especially with Memphis and the god Ptah, is one of the most striking examples of a living sacred animal. A particular bull, recognised by markings and ritual criteria, can be treated as a manifestation of divine presence during life and buried with extraordinary ceremony after death. The massive underground galleries of the Serapeum at Saqqara, where sacred bulls were interred in huge stone sarcophagi, show how far animal cults could go. The scale is almost disorienting. A bull can receive a burial that feels royal in ambition. Crocodiles inspire a different kind of reverence. To live beside the Nile is to know that the water feeding the fields can also hide teeth. Sobek embodies the danger and fertility of the river's power. In some places, crocodiles are venerated, fed, adorned, or mummified. In others, they are feared and hunted. Egyptian religion can hold such contradictions because local traditions matter. The same animal may be sacred in one town and unwelcome in another. No single explanation fully accounts for animal cults across all of Egypt, because they change by region, period, temple economy, and theological emphasis. The ibis is another creature whose afterlife becomes enormous. Sacred ibises, associated with Thoth, the god of writing, wisdom, calculation, and lunar order, are mummified in staggering numbers in later periods. Catacombs filled with bird mummies reveal not just devotion but an industry. Pilgrims may purchase animal mummies as offerings. Temples may breed or acquire animals for ritual use. Priests, embalmers, potters, linen workers, and suppliers all participate. A single wrapped bird becomes part of a large religious economy. Some bundles contain complete animals, others contain partial remains, mixed bones, or even no animal where one might expect it. Scholars still debate how to interpret such variation, whether as symbolic substitution, fraud, changing ritual standards, or practical response to demand. Animal mummification is one of Egypt's strangest intersections of tenderness, theology, and mass production. There are beloved pets carefully buried by owners. There are sacred animals honoured as unique divine manifestations. There are votive mummies offered by thousands upon thousands of worshippers. These categories overlap but should not be confused. A pet cat wrapped for a grieving household is not the same as a mass-produced votive cat mummy. And a sacred bull is not the same as an ordinary farm animal. Ancient Egypt contained all of these at once. The sheer number of animal mummies can feel almost unsettling. Millions of ibis, cat, dog, falcon, crocodile, fish, shrew, snake, and other animal remains have been found in different sites. This tells us about devotion, but it also tells us about supply chains. Animals must be bred, captured, raised, killed, prepared, wrapped, stored, sold, and deposited. The sacred leaves behind logistics again. Just as pyramids require bakeries, animal cults require management. Yet animals are not only religious objects, they are woven into art because they make the world intelligible. Tomb scenes show birds in marshes, fish in water, cattle crossing, donkeys loaded with goods, monkeys under chairs, cats attacking birds, and hunting dogs in motion. These scenes can be idealized, symbolic, or connected with afterlife abundance, but they also preserve careful observation. Egyptian artists know the curve of a duck's neck, the tension of a hunting cat, the heavy body of cattle, the sharp watchfulness of a falcon. Their art is formal, but not blind. Some animals mark danger. Snakes are both feared and sacred. The cobra can protect the king as the uraeus on his brow, but snakes can also threaten sleepers, children, and workers. Scorpions provoke similar anxiety. Protective spells against bites and stings are not abstract religious exercises. They answer real hazards. The goddess Serket, associated with scorpions and protection, reflects a world where venom is part of daily fear. The household gods discussed earlier are not protecting against imaginary troubles only. The floor, wall, field, and sandal can all hide a living needle. The hippopotamus is another powerful contradiction. To modern eyes, it may look almost comic, but Egyptians know it as dangerous, territorial, and destructive to crops. Male hippos can symbolize chaos, and hunting them can carry royal or cosmic meaning. Yet the female hippopotamus form contributes to Taweret, the protective goddess of childbirth. The same animal body can become a sign of both threat and safety depending on which qualities are being drawn forward. Egyptian symbolism is not a simple code. It is a living language of selected powers. This is why animal-headed gods should not be reduced to fantasy. They are Egypt's way of saying that the divine is recognized through force, behavior, habitat, and form. The falcon sees from above, the jackal knows the necropolis edge, the crocodile rules the hidden river, the cow nourishes, the lioness destroys and protects, the scarab beetle, rolling its ball across the ground, becomes connected with solar rebirth. Because Egyptians observe in the small creature a pattern that resembles cosmic renewal. A beetle pushing matter through dust becomes an image of the sun itself. It is one of the most Egyptian leaps imaginable, humble, strange, and vast. At the same time, affection survives inside the symbolism. Some pets receive names, some are depicted beneath their owners' chairs, some are buried with care. The evidence remains incomplete, but it is enough to show that Egyptians are not always thinking in grand theology when they look at animals. Sometimes they are looking at a familiar creature sharing the household, stealing food, guarding the door, warming itself, or waiting near the hand that feeds it. As night returns, animals become part of the soundscape. Dogs bark at movement beyond the wall, birds settle in reeds, donkeys shift in their sleep, cats vanish into grain stores, crocodiles wait unseen in dark water. The Egyptian house, field, temple, and tomb are all surrounded by non-human lives, and the people of the Nile understand that these lives are not separate from their own fate. Animals feed them, threaten them, protect them, carry them, symbolize their gods, and accompany them into death. In the end, ancient Egypt's animal world reveals a civilization paying close attention. It watches the riverbank and learns theology from teeth. It watches the sky and finds kingship in wings. It watches a beetle in the sand and sees the sun reborn. It watches a cat in a doorway and imagines protection with glowing eyes. The past becomes quieter when seen this way, less like a gallery of statues and more like a living landscape full of movement, breath, hunger, and watchfulness. The story of ancient Egypt is often told through kings, but the houses, temples, courts, fields, and tombs are never inhabited by men alone. Women stand everywhere in the record, sometimes brightly lit, sometimes half hidden behind titles, kinship, or damaged evidence. They appear as queens, mothers, daughters, singers, priestesses, mourners, estate managers, servants, weavers, brewers, dancers, midwives, property holders, goddesses, and occasionally rulers who step into the full glare of kingship. Their lives are not easy to summarise, because Egypt changes across centuries, class matters deeply, and the evidence remains incomplete. But the surviving traces are enough to make one thing clear: women are not decorative figures at the edge of Egyptian civilization. They are part of its structure. In many ancient societies, women's legal and economic identities are heavily constrained, and Egypt is sometimes presented as unusually favourable by comparison. There is truth in that. Though it needs care, Egyptian women can own property, inherit, make contracts, bring legal cases, divorce, and manage goods in ways that surprise people expecting the ancient world to be uniformly silent about female agency. This does not mean Egypt is an equal society in the modern sense. High office is still dominated by men, kingship is normally male, scribal culture is largely male, and many records reach us through institutions controlled by men. Yet compared with several neighbouring societies, Egyptian women leave unusually strong legal traces. A woman's status depends on birth, wealth, region, period, and household. An elite woman may control estates, sponsor offerings, serve in temple roles, or appear prominently in tomb scenes. A poorer woman may spend her life grinding grain, raising children, hauling water, brewing beer, weaving linen, working fields, or serving in another household. Both are Egyptian women, but their worlds differ greatly. The smooth image of a noble woman in fine linen, scented comb, jewellery. An elaborate wig should not erase the woman whose hands are rough from work and whose body carries the strain of childbirth and labour. Queens occupy the most visible female space near power. The title of Great Royal Wife marks a woman's closeness to the king and can carry major political weight. Royal mothers can be even more important, especially when their sons come to the throne young or need legitimacy. In a court where bloodline, ritual status, and succession matter, a queen is not simply a consort. She can be a bridge between dynasties, a symbol of continuity, a manager of estates, a ritual partner, and a political actor whose influence may be strong even when the texts do not explain it fully. Some women go further. Hatshepsut becomes pharaoh, not merely queen, and presents herself with the full language of kingship. Her monuments show a careful negotiation between female identity and male-coded royal tradition. She may be called daughter, wife, and king, and her images can shift between feminine and masculine conventions depending on context. Her reign is not a brief accident. It is a major period of building, trade, and stability. Later attacks on her memory complicate her story, and scholars still debate the motives behind them, but her success makes one point unavoidable: Egyptian kingship is normally male, yet the system can bend when power, legitimacy, and circumstance align. Nefertiti, the famous queen of Akhenaten, is another figure who seems close to power but remains difficult to pin down. Her image is everywhere in the Amarna period, appearing in religious scenes and royal family imagery with unusual prominence. Some scholars have argued she may have ruled briefly under another name, though the evidence remains debated. Her beauty in modern imagination often overshadows the more interesting fact. She is visible at the heart of a radical religious and artistic transformation. Whether queen, co-regent, or something more, she stands in one of Egypt's strangest political experiments. Women also serve in temples. The roles vary by period and cult, but priestesses, chantresses, musicians, and women associated with divine service appear across the record. The title, God's wife of Amun, becomes especially powerful in later periods, tied to wealth, ritual authority, and political influence at Thebes. Music is not a minor matter in Egyptian religion. Sistrums, chants, and ritual performance help please and pacify deities, especially goddesses such as Hathor. A woman shaking a sacred rattle in a temple scene may look graceful, but she is participating in cosmic maintenance. The goddess world gives women another kind of presence. Isis becomes a model of magical power, motherhood, mourning, and restoration. Hathor embodies love, music, fertility, beauty, intoxication, and the dangerous warmth of divine femininity. Sekhmet burns with destructive force and healing power. Neith Mut Nut Taret, and many others show that divine femininity is not confined to gentleness. Goddesses create, protect, devour, heal, mourn, and rule the sky. Their power does not automatically translate into equal social power for women, but it shapes the symbolic world in which women live. Childbirth brings the story back into the house. Pregnancy is hope and danger in the same body. Medical texts, amulets, birth bricks, household deities, and protective images all point toward anxiety around birth. The mother's survival is not guaranteed. The infant's survival is not guaranteed. No royal theology removes the risk from a poor woman kneeling or squatting in labour. surrounded by helpers, heat, blood, and fear. The evidence remains incomplete. But the repeated presence of protective rituals says enough. Birth is treated as a threshold where the human and invisible worlds crowd close. Motherhood is highly valued, but women are not only mothers. Love poetry from ancient Egypt gives glimpses of desire, longing, flirtation, and emotional life. Tomb scenes show couples seated together, hands touching, a wife's arm around her husband, shared offerings, shared hopes for the afterlife. These images are idealized, but they are not meaningless. They suggest that partnership, affection, sexuality, and family identity all matter deeply. Marriage itself does not always require a formal religious ceremony in the way modern people might expect. It is often a household and social arrangement, recognized through cohabitation, property, family, and contracts in certain contexts. Cosmetics form another intimate record: coal, oils, perfumes, mirrors, combs, razors, tweezers, beads, and cosmetic vessels appear in both life and burial. Beauty in Egypt is practical, sensual, and sacred. Scented oils protect skin in a dry climate. Eye paint enhances appearance and may have protective associations. Wigs allow style, status, and cleanliness. Jewellery can display wealth, ward off danger, and complete the body for social and ritual life. A cosmetic spoon carved in elegant form may belong to a world of luxury, but the desire to care for the body crosses class in simpler ways too. Women work constantly. They weave linen, and linen is everywhere: clothing, bedding, temple offerings, mummy wrappings, sails, bags, and household cloth. They brew beer, prepare food, raise children, manage domestic stores, and in many cases labour in fields or workshops. Elite Tumar often idealises women as beautifully dressed companions, but archaeological and textual evidence reminds us that most women's days are filled with tasks. The civilization's softness is linen, bread, beer. An household order rests partly on female labour that rarely receives monumental praise. Grief gives women one of their most visible ritual roles. Professional mourning scenes show women with raised arms, loosened hair, and expressive gestures. In funerary ritual, women may embody Isis and Nephthys mourning Osiris, turning private loss into cosmic drama. This does not mean grief is staged only as performance. Ritual gives grief a shape. It allows human sorrow to enter a myth where death can be answered, at least symbolically, by restoration. The hidden women of Egypt are hidden not because they were absent, but because survival favours certain voices. Papyrus decays, mud brick collapses, poor households vanish. Male officials write more often. Royal women are remembered when politically useful and erased when inconvenient. What remains must be read carefully: a legal contract here, a tomb image there, a name on an ostracon, a burial, a textile tool, a medical spell, a statue fragment, a title. By the time night settles over the Nile Valley again, the women of Egypt are everywhere if one has learned to see them. One sits beside a lamp repairing linen. One counts stored grain. One sings in a temple court. One grinds barley until her shoulders ache. One gives birth with Taweret watching from an amulet. One rules as king beneath a false beard. One is painted beside her husband, hoping to receive offerings forever. One is unnamed. Her work dissolved into the survival of everyone around her. Egypt's monuments may speak most loudly in male royal voices, but beneath them runs another history, quieter and more continuous, like a thread pulled through linen and tied carefully so it will not come undone. Some Egyptian cities disappear not because they are destroyed in a single dramatic night, but because the landscape quietly changes its mind. A canal silts up, a branch of the Nile shifts, a harbour loses water, a desert road falls out of use, a temple loses its income, mud brick walls melt back into earth after rain, wind, neglect, and reuse. Later villagers dig into old walls for building material. Farmers level ancient ground without malice, needing fields more than memories. Sand covers one place while wet soil consumes another. Egypt is famous for preservation, but it is also a country of vanishings. The lost cities of Egypt are not all lost in the same way. Some are buried beneath modern towns, making excavation difficult or impossible. Some lie in the desert, preserved because no later settlement smothered them. Some are known from texts but remain uncertain on the ground. Some were found, mapped, and then partly lost again to erosion, looting, groundwater, or development. The evidence remains incomplete, and this is one reason Egypt still feels inexhaustible. The past is not a finished museum. It is layered under villages, fields, roads, military zones, shifting sands, and the Nile's long memory. A city in ancient Egypt is often more fragile than a tomb. Temples may be stone, but houses, workshops, walls, storage areas, and administrative buildings are often mud brick. When a town is abandoned, it does not stand like a Roman ruin with arches and columns waiting under the sky. It slumps, roofs collapse, bricks dissolve, pottery scatters, floors fill with dust, doorways vanish. The shape of life flattens until only careful excavation can find it again. This means that some of Egypt's most important settlements survive as low mounds, called tells, whose dull surfaces hide centuries of occupation. One of the most evocative examples is Akheten, the city now known as Amarna, founded by Akhenaten for his god Aten. Unlike many Egyptian cities buried beneath later life, Amarna was occupied for a relatively short time and then largely abandoned, leaving an unusually readable plan, It is not a normal capital, slowly grown from old roots. It is a royal experiment imposed on the desert edge, with palaces, temples open to the sun, elite houses, workers' villages, roads, boundary stele, and cemeteries that reveal a harder reality beneath the religious vision. The art of Amarna can feel intimate and luminous, but the bones from its poorer cemeteries speak of labour stress, malnutrition, and brief lives. A city built for divine light still casts human shadows. Amarna shows how fast royal will can make a city, and how fast a city can fade when that will collapses. After Akhenaten's death, his religious revolution is reversed, the court leaves, and the city loses its reason to exist. Buildings are dismantled, memories are attacked. Later, Egypt treats the Amarna episode as a disruption to be corrected. What remains is not simply a lost city, but a fossil of a political and theological gamble. No single explanation fully accounts for all the motives behind Akhenaten's revolution, but the abandoned city makes the cost visible. Other places vanish through water rather than ideology. The Nile Delta is one of the most difficult regions for archaeology because it is wet, heavily inhabited, and constantly reshaped by river branches and human settlement. Yet it was enormously important. Capitals, ports, military centres, and sacred cities stood there, connected to the Mediterranean and the wide Near East. In the Delta, the problem is not always sand-covering ruins, it is mud, groundwater, agriculture, and modern life. A temple block reused in a village, a statue found in a field, a mound barely rising above cultivation. These may be the remaining signs of a city once central to power. Tanis is one of the Delta's great examples of rediscovery and confusion. For a time, it was even mistakenly associated in popular imagination with other lost places, because its ruins contained monuments moved from earlier royal centres. Egyptian kings often reuse stone from older sites, and this recycling can scramble memory. A statue bearing one king's name may stand in a city built up by another. A block carved for a temple elsewhere may be dragged into a new sacred landscape. The result is an archaeological puzzle in which cities borrow the past from each other. Memphis, one of ancient Egypt's greatest capitals, is another kind of vanished giant. For millennia, it is a centre of administration, religion, craft, and royal power, located near the meeting point of Upper and Lower Egypt. Yet today, it does not present itself as a single overwhelming ruin. Much of it lies under fields, villages, and alluvial deposits. The city that once helped govern Egypt survives in fragments colossal statues, temple remains, necropolises nearby, scattered blocks, and traces beneath the ground. Its disappearance is almost more impressive than its survival. A capital can rule for ages and still become a landscape of pieces. The desert preserves different stories. Roads across the eastern desert lead to quarries, mines, ports, wells, and forts. Egypt's stone monuments require quarry landscapes, and those landscapes have their own archaeology tool marks, workers' shelters, inscriptions, ramps, roads, and broken attempts. The stone in a temple may have begun in a remote desert quarry where crews lived under harsh conditions, cutting blocks from cliffs far from the green comfort of the Nile, the Wadi Hammamat. With its inscriptions and quarrying history, reminds us that Egypt's monuments are connected to places most visitors never imagine. The Red Sea ports add another layer. Sites such as Mersa Gawasis reveal Egypt's maritime reach, including evidence for seafaring expeditions, possibly linked to voyages toward Punt, the famous land of incense, ebony, exotic animals, and prestige goods. Ships could be built, disassembled, transported, or assembled for Red Sea travel in complex ways. Caves and harbour remains preserve ropes, planks, anchors, and cargo traces. The Egyptians are often imagined as river people only, but their world also reaches into desert roads and sea routes. Scholars still debate the exact location of Punt, but the evidence for Egypt's long-distance ambitions is real. Fortresses in Nubia show another face of settlement. Along the Nile to the south, Egypt builds military and administrative sites to control movement, trade, gold, and territory. These forts are not romantic lost cities in the usual sense. They are instruments of power, placed in strategic landscapes where Egypt meets Nubia, sometimes trading, sometimes ruling, sometimes fighting, always watching. Their mud brick walls, magazines, command spaces, and inscriptions speak of empire at the frontier. When political control changes, such sites can be abandoned, reused, or swallowed by new realities. Some lost places are workmen's villages, and these are among the most intimate. Deir el-Medina, though not lost now, preserves the lives of the artisans who made royal tombs. Kahun, associated with pyramid town life near the Fayum, offers glimpses of planned settlement, domestic arrangements, medical papyri, tools, and everyday administration. These places matter because they show how the grand projects are supported by communities with streets, houses, rubbish, illness, disputes, and routines. Egypt's vanished towns are often more revealing than its surviving temples because they bring us closer to ordinary time. The Fayum itself tells a story of transformation. This fertile depression connected to the Nile becomes a major zone of cultivation, royal interest, settlement, and later, Greco-Roman life. Water management changes the landscape, expanding agriculture and shaping human occupation. Egypt is not just a gift to the Nile in a passive sense. It is also a country of canals, basins, dikes, labour, and decisions. Places flourish where water is managed well and decline when systems fail. politics shift, or maintenance becomes impossible. Then there are the cities under the sea. Near the Mediterranean coast, ancient Canopus and Thonis Heracleon, once connected to trade and religion, are now famous for underwater archaeology, subsidence, rising seas, earthquakes, soil liquefaction, and changing coastlines contributed to their submergence over time. Statues, temple stones, shipwrecks, anchors, coins, and ritual objects have emerged from the water, turning the seafloor into a drowned archive. These are among the most cinematic Egyptian discoveries because they reverse expectation. Egypt is supposed to rise from sand, yet here it rises from green water. The drowned city changes the emotional texture of archaeology. Columns lie where fish pass, statues sleep under silt, goods once handled by merchants rest beside anchors and broken stone. The sea does not preserve like desert air. It covers, corrodes, shifts, and conceals. What survives suggests that Egypt's northern edge was a place of movement, exchange, and vulnerability. The Mediterranean was not a distant backdrop. It was a living frontier. All these places remind us that ancient Egypt is not only a line of kings, it is a geography of centres that rise, serve a purpose, and sometimes lose that purpose. A town may be born from a pyramid project, a temple cult, a trade route, a military need, a royal experiment, a harbour, a quarry, or a patch of manageable water. When the reason fades, the town begins its long retreat into earth. At dusk, a lost city is hardest to imagine because the modern landscape looks so complete without it. A field lies quiet, a village road bends past a mound. Reeds move in a canal. A fisherman crosses water where a harbour may once have received ships. Children play above walls they cannot see. The past does not always announce itself with columns. Sometimes it waits as a rise in the soil, a reused block, a line on a satellite image, a scatter of pottery after rain. Egypt is still full of such sleeping places, and every one of them asks the same soft question: how much of a civilization can vanish while its name remains immortal? The first time hieroglyphs appear to a modern eye, they seem almost too beautiful to be writing. Birds stand still in profile. Snakes curve with controlled menace. Eyes stare outward. Hands, reeds, owls, baskets, water ripples, seated figures, stars, mouths, houses, and sacred standards gather in rows like a world reduced to signs. It is easy to forget that these images are not merely decoration. They are language, memory, administration, magic, ownership, prayer, threat, and survival. In Egypt, writing does not simply record the world, it helps hold the world together. The Egyptian writing system develops near the beginning of the dynastic state, alongside the need to identify people, places, offerings, goods, rulers, and authority. Early labels, tags, seal impressions, and inscriptions show writing emerging in a world already concerned with control. Grain, oil, cloth, cattle, land, jars, tomb goods, and royal names must be marked. Before writing becomes a grand temple wall, it is already attached to accounting and power. A sign can say where something belongs, who commands it, which estate produced it, which king rules over it. The first written marks are not sleepy ornaments, they are instruments of organisation. Hieroglyphs work in several ways at once. Some signs represent sounds, some represent whole words, some clarify meaning without being pronounced. This makes the system flexible and visually rich, but also difficult for outsiders. A bird may be a bird, a sound, an idea, or a clue to a category. The same sign can belong to multiple layers of meaning depending on context. Egyptian scribes are trained to move through these layers with confidence. To the untrained, the system feels mysterious. To the scribe, it is craft. Writing has forms suited to different materials and purposes. Formal hieroglyphs suit stone, tombs, temples, and monumental display, hieratic, a faster cursive script, serves daily writing on papyrus, ostraca, wood, and other surfaces. Later, demotic becomes another practical script for administration, legal documents, and daily use. The beautiful carved bird on a temple wall and the hurried ink mark on a potsherd belong to the same broad civilization, but they live at different speeds. Monumental writing wants eternity. Everyday writing wants the delivery counted before sunset. The scribe stands between those worlds. Scribal training is demanding, and literacy is limited. To write is to enter a privileged profession connected with administration, temple life, law, taxation, literature, and royal service. Scribes copy, calculate, compose, inspect, record, and preserve. They may avoid the harshest manual labour, and some instructional texts praise the scribal life by comparing it favourably with the misery of other trades. The praise is self-serving, of course, but it reveals a real social truth. A person who controls records can shape reality for people who cannot read them. A humble ostracon, a broken piece of pottery or limestone used as a writing surface, may bring us closer to daily life than a polished inscription. Ostraca preserve notes, sketches, accounts, delivery records, letters, drafts, complaints, and exercises. They are the scrap paper of ancient Egypt. Their survival is one of archaeology's quiet gifts. On them, one may find the civilization thinking in ordinary time who's absent from work, how many jars arrived, what needs to be paid, which design an artist is practicing, what message must be sent, The grand written culture has a rough edge, and that rough edge is often the most human. Letters are especially revealing. Egyptians write to officials, relatives, workers, superiors, and even the dead. A letter can request supplies, complain about treatment, settle disputes, express concern, or ask for help. The tone varies from formal to sharp to intimate. Since many letters survive by accident, the evidence remains incomplete, but what survives suggests a society where written communication extends deeply into administration and private life. At least for those with access to scribes, a person does not need to be personally literate to use writing. They can dictate. Writing is a service as well as a skill. Then there is writing for the dead. Tomb inscriptions preserve names, titles, offerings, prayers, autobiographical claims, and scenes of ideal abundance. The offering formula is repeated across centuries because repetition has power. A name carved in stone is not only information, it is a lifeline. To speak or read the name of the dead helps sustain them. To erase it attacks them. The written name is one of the strongest bridges between memory and existence. Funerary texts grow across time in complexity and reach. Pyramid texts, first appearing in the royal pyramids of the late Old Kingdom, are among the oldest large bodies of religious writing in the world. They are concerned with the king's ascent, protection, transformation, and union with divine powers. Later coffin texts expand access to afterlife knowledge beyond royalty, appearing on coffins of non-royal elites. Still later, texts commonly called the Book of the Dead provide spells, guidance, and ritual knowledge for navigating the afterlife. This development does not mean Egyptian religion becomes simple or democratic overnight, but it does show afterlife knowledge moving through society in changing ways. The so-called Book of the Dead is not a single fixed book in the modern sense. It is a collection of spells and chapters selected, arranged, copied, and illustrated differently for different people and periods. Some copies are lavish, others are shorter or less carefully made. Spells may help the deceased breathe, move, avoid dangers, transform into powerful beings, pass gates, and survive judgment. The famous weighing of the heart scene distills one of Egypt's most enduring moral images. The life lived cannot be entirely escaped, but even here, ritual knowledge matters. The dead are equipped with words. Words can protect, but they can also threaten. Tomb curses are less common and often less theatrical than popular culture suggests, yet protective inscriptions do exist. They warn potential violators that harm may come to those who damage the tomb or disturb offerings. Such texts are not Hollywood curses waiting in sealed chambers. They are part of a broader legal, ritual, and social effort to defend the dead. The real tomb robbers were usually not frightened away forever. Gold had its own persuasive theology. Writing also creates official memory. Royal inscriptions announce victories, building projects, offerings, divine approval, and the defeat of enemies. They are not neutral news reports. They are controlled statements of what power once remembered. A pharaoh may describe a battle as triumph, even when the strategic reality is more complicated. A temple wall may show endless order, while politics outside are unstable. Scholars still debate many events because royal texts are evidence. But they are evidence with a purpose. Egyptian writing preserves truth and performance together. The Rosetta Stone, though much later than the Pyramid Age, becomes the key that allows modern scholars to recover hieroglyphic reading. Its inscription in hieroglyphic, demotic, and Greek helps unlock a system that had fallen silent for centuries. But the stone is not magical by itself. Decipherment required comparison, linguistic insight, knowledge of Coptic, and the work of scholars over time. Once hieroglyphs could be read again, Egypt changed from a mute landscape of wonders into a civilization with voices. The statues began to name themselves. The tombs began to speak. Yet even when writing is readable, interpretation is not automatic. A text may be damaged, formulaic, symbolic, propagandistic, copied from older models, or written for a ritual context we only partly understand. No single inscription can carry the whole truth of a life. A tomb biography may claim virtue, generosity, loyalty, and success, but it is also a self-presentation. A legal document may preserve a dispute but not the emotions behind it. A spell may reveal fear but not the exact ritual as performed. The evidence remains incomplete, and writing sometimes hides as much as it reveals. One lesser-known wonder is how Egyptian artists and scribes play with the visual power of signs. Dangerous animals and hieroglyphic inscriptions can be modified, cut, or shown incomplete in tomb context to prevent them from magically harming the deceased. A snake sign might be carved in pieces, a bird might be controlled. This is writing treated not as dead ink but as active presence. Images can do things. Therefore images must sometimes be restrained. To a modern reader, this may seem like superstition. To an Egyptian, it is caution in a world where representation and reality touch. At the edge of evening, a scribe's palette rests with cakes of black and red ink. Black writes the main body, red marks headings, warnings, emphasis, or dangerous names. A reed brush waits beside a sheet of papyrus. The work may be a tax list, a hymn, a legal document, a school exercise, or a spell for someone who hopes not to be lost after death. The hand moves, and a life enters marks. Egypt survives because stone preserves images, but it becomes intimate because writing preserves intention. A jar label, a love poem, a rationalist, a royal boast, a curse, a prayer, a child's exercise, A letter to the dead each is a small act of resistance against disappearance. The body may fail, the house may collapse, the city may sink or be buried, but a name, if written and read, can travel farther than its owner ever imagined. The smell of Egypt in the morning is bread, before the temples open fully, before the scribes settle into their records, before the river glare grows hard and white. Grain is being ground, dough is being shaped, ovens are being heated, and beer is already somewhere in the making. A civilization can cover its tombs with stars and fill its myths with gods, but every day it must answer the same plain question: who will eat, and who will go hungry? Bread and beer are the foundation. They are wages, offerings, meals, taxes, rations, comfort, and survival. Workers are paid in food and goods, not coins for much of Egyptian history. A labourer's ration is not a small domestic detail. It is part of the machinery of the state. If grain fails, everything above it trembles. Temples, palaces, tomb projects, armies, and festivals all depend on fields that must be sown, irrigated, harvested, stored, protected, measured, and redistributed. Egypt's sacred order has a pantry. The bread itself is not one thing. Different shapes, grains, recipes, and qualities exist across class and period. Emmer wheat and barley are central crops, though agricultural patterns shift over Egypt's long history. Bread can be made in moulds, baked in ovens, shaped into loaves, offered to gods, packed into tombs, or eaten as the ordinary weight of the day. It is dense with labour before it reaches the mouth. Grain must be harvested with sickles, gathered, threshed, winnowed, stored, carried. Ground, mixed, and baked, the loaf is the final visible stage of a chain of human effort. Beer is just as important, and it is not merely a recreational drink. Egyptian beer is nutritious, thick by modern expectations, and part of daily diet. It can be safer than untreated water in some contexts, though one should not imagine every Egyptian constantly avoiding water. Beer belongs to work, wages, ritual, and celebration. It is brewed in households and larger production settings, using grain, fermentation, jars, heat, and skill. A worker building royal eternity may be sustained by a ration of bread and beer, which sounds almost poetic until one remembers that rations are also control. To feed someone is to bind them into a system. The Nile flood stands behind every meal. When the inundation is good, fields receive water and silt. When it is low, harvests suffer. When it is dangerously high, homes and fields may be damaged. Egypt's food system is resilient across long stretches, but not invincible. The evidence remains incomplete for many local crises, yet texts and archaeology point again and again to the fear of famine. Empty granaries are not just economic trouble, they are cosmic embarrassment. If the king maintains order, why does hunger enter the land? This is where administration becomes as important as rainfall. Egypt stores grain because the future is uncertain. Granaries are instruments of survival and power. Officials measure harvests, assess taxes, supervise transport, and redistribute supplies. Scribes make food visible to the state. A field of barley becomes numbers. Numbers become obligation. Obligation becomes rations for workers, offerings for gods, salaries for officials, supplies for expeditions, and reserves against need. In theory, this is order. In practice, it's also an opportunity for corruption, delay, and suffering. A missing measure of grain can become a hungry household. Peasants carry much of the burden. They work the fields, maintain irrigation, pay taxes, and provide labour. Tomb scenes often show agriculture in calm, orderly compositions, ploughing, sowing, harvesting, threshing, carrying, counting. The scenes are beautiful, but the work is hard. Mud grips feet, heat presses down, insects bite, backs bend, timing matters, tools are simple, animals help, but humans remain central. The idealised harvest painted for eternity does not show every blister. Gardens add another layer to Egyptian food and pleasure. Elite homes and temples may have gardens with pools, shade trees, flowers, vegetables, fruits, and symbolic meaning. Sycamore figs, dates, grapes, pomegranates in later periods, lettuce, onions, garlic, cucumbers or related gourds, legumes, herbs, and other plants appear in Egypt's food world with changes over time and region. Some foods are everyday staples, others are seasonal, imported, elite, or ritual. The garden is practical. But it is also an image of controlled abundance. In a country where desert presses close, shade is wealth. Fish are abundant in the Nile and marshes, though attitudes toward fish vary by region, period, and religious context. For many people, fish provide accessible protein. They can be caught, dried, salted, and traded. Tumart shows fishing as leisure for elites and labour for others, a familiar ancient double vision where the same act is both survival and symbol. Birds are hunted in marshes, cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, ducks, and geese supply meat, milk, hides, labour. Or ritual value in different contexts. Meat is desirable, but not equally available to all. A peasant may eat far less beef than an elite household or a provisioned work crew. Onions and garlic deserve their quiet fame. They are practical, flavourful, storable, and common enough to appear in ordinary diets and offerings. Lentils, beans, and other pulses help sustain people when meat is rare. Dates and figs offer sweetness. Honey is prized, used in food, medicine, and offerings. Wine exists and can carry status, especially in elite contexts, but beer remains the broader drink of Egypt's daily life. The table is a map of class. Festivals temporarily change the rhythm of consumption. Temple calendars include feast days, processions, offerings, music, intoxication, and communal participation. Food offered to gods does not simply vanish into divine mouths. After ritual presentation, offerings can be redistributed among priests and temple personnel. Temples are therefore religious and economic institutions at once. They own land, employ workers, store goods, receive donations, and feed people through complex channels. A festival is devotion, spectacle, and resource movement woven together. The beautiful festival of the Valley at Thebes, for example, brings gods, the living, and the dead into a shared ritual landscape. Families visit tombs, make offerings, eat, drink, and reconnect with ancestors. Such moments remind us that food is not only nutrition, it is memory. To offer bread and beer to the dead is to keep relationship alive. A tomb offering scene showing endless loaves, cattle, jars, and fowl is an image of eternal supply. A dream that hunger will never cross the threshold again. But hunger does cross thresholds. Famine texts, while sometimes literary or ideological, reflect a real fear of failed inundations and social breakdown. The first intermediate period preserves voices that may describe disorder, scarcity, and reversal, though scholars still debate how much is historical memory, literary convention, or elite anxiety. Later records also speak of shortages. No single explanation fully accounts for every crisis, but climate variability, weak central administration, local inequality, and storage failures all play possible roles. Egypt's food system is powerful because it is organised. It is vulnerable for the same reason. If the chain breaks, many depend on it. One lesser-known detail is that ancient Egyptian food remains can be intensely revealing, even when they look unimpressive. Charred grain, desiccated bread, beer residues, animal bones, fish scales, seeds, pollen, and microscopic plant traces help reconstruct diet and economy. A burnt loaf may tell us more about daily life than a royal boast. Archaeologists can examine what people ate, what they stored, what they threw away, and sometimes what they intended for the afterlife. Garbage is one of history's most honest archives. Taxes make food political. The state does not need to own every field directly to command agricultural surplus. It can assess, collect, store, and redistribute. Officials who measure fields after the flood are not merely surveyors, they are agents of obligation. A farmer may see the Nile's silt as blessing, but the state sees the same field as taxable potential. This is the double edge of abundance. The river gives, and then someone arrives to count the gift. At the household level, survival depends on skillful management. Grain must be protected from rodents, moisture, theft, and spoilage. Beer must be brewed before it turns. Bread must be made repeatedly. Fuel must be gathered. Water must be carried. Children must be fed first or last depending on crisis, custom, and desperation. In good years, there is room for flavour, festivity, and offerings. In bad years, food becomes arithmetic with fear inside it. As evening falls, the smell of cooking returns. A family gathers near bread, beer, onions, perhaps fish, perhaps lentils, perhaps something richer if fortune allows. Across the land, temples receive offerings more abundant than any poor household can imagine. In tombs, painted tables overflow forever. In granaries, scribes' numbers promise order. In fields, the next crop waits on water that has not yet come. Ancient Egypt's grandeur rests on this fragile cycle. The pyramids are made of stone, but they are powered by bread. The gods receive incense, but they also receive geese, loaves, beer jars, lettuce, fruit, and cuts of meat. The dead dream of eternal feast because the living know hunger too well. A civilization that seems obsessed with eternity is, every morning, kneading dough against the possibility of want. Egypt looks self-contained on a map only if the eye stops at the desert. The Nile Valley seems like a sealed world, green in the middle, red on both sides, guarded by cataracts to the south and sea to the north. But ancient Egypt is never truly alone. Goods, people, animals, ideas, diseases, weapons, brides, prisoners, artists, soldiers, merchants, and gods cross its borders constantly. The kingdom that presents itself as the centre of order is also a participant in a restless wider world. To the south lies Nubia, a region of deep importance and deep complexity. Egyptian texts often describe Nubia through the language of control, tribute, gold, and foreignness. But Nubia is not merely Egypt's shadow. It has its own cultures, rulers, cities, cemeteries, languages, artistic traditions, and political ambitions. At different times, Egypt trades with Nubia, fights Nubia, occupies parts of Nubia, builds forts there, extracts gold, recruits soldiers, and absorbs influence from the south. Later, rulers from Kush will come north and rule Egypt itself. The border is not a wall, it is a long argument. Gold is one of the reasons Egypt looks south and east with such intensity. Egyptian royal and temple wealth depends heavily on access to precious materials, and Nubian gold helps feed the image of pharaonic splendour. Gold in Egypt is not simply money. It is divine flesh, solar radiance, royal permanence. When a king covers a coffin, shrine, or mask in gold, he is not only displaying wealth, He is wrapping power in the colour of immortality. But behind that glow are mines, desert routes. Forced labour, guarded expeditions, and political pressure. The beauty of gold has a hard geography. To the northeast, Egypt faces the Sinai, the Levant, and the routes into Western Asia. Copper and turquoise come from Sinai mines. Timber, especially cedar from Lebanon and nearby regions, is valuable because Egypt has limited native large timber for major construction. Wine, oil, silver, lapis lazuli through longer exchange networks, horses and chariots in later periods, luxury goods, and skilled people all move through Near Eastern connections. Egypt may call itself uniquely ordered. But its elite culture depends on foreign materials. Even the most Egyptian palace can contain objects whose origins lie beyond the Nile. Trade and diplomacy often travel together. In the late Bronze Age, Egypt is part of an international system linking great powers such as Babylon, Assyria, Mitanni, Hatti, Cyprus, and city-states of the Levant. Royal letters from Amarna reveal a world of gifts, complaints, marriage negotiations, requests for gold, arguments over status, and carefully performed brotherhood between kings. The language is diplomatic, but the emotions are recognizable irritation, flattery, pressure, suspicion. Pride. A foreign ruler may ask why Egypt has sent so little gold. An Egyptian king may expect loyalty from vassals in Canaan. Diplomacy is ceremony with sharp edges. Foreign princesses enter Egyptian courts through marriage alliances, though Egyptian royal women are rarely sent abroad in the same way. This imbalance reflects Egypt's ideology of superiority and the special status of royal women within succession and legitimacy. A foreign bride may arrive with attendants, goods, language, customs, and political meaning. What she feels is usually lost to us. The record preserves the transaction more clearly than the person. The evidence remains incomplete. But one can still sense the human reality beneath the gold. A woman moves into a court far from home because kingdoms wish to manage danger through marriage. Egypt's contact with the Levant is not always peaceful. Campaigns into Canaan and Syria bring tribute, prisoners, fortresses, garrisons, and monumental boasts. Thutmose III's campaigns helped build Egypt's new kingdom empire in Asia. Rameses II's famous battle at Kadesh against the Hittites becomes one of the great propaganda events of antiquity, recorded in Egyptian texts as a magnificent royal triumph. Though the strategic reality is more complicated, later, Egypt and Hatti make a peace treaty. A reminder that even mighty kings eventually discover the usefulness of paperwork after chariots have done enough damage. The chariot itself marks a transformation, introduced into Egypt through broader Near Eastern military developments, especially in the Second Intermediate Period and early New Kingdom context. The horse-drawn chariot becomes a prestige weapon and symbol of royal power. It changes the image of warfare. The king can now appear racing across the battlefield, bow drawn, enemies scattered beneath wheels. Yet this military technology is foreign in origin, or at least foreign in transmission. Egypt's royal ideology absorbs it so completely that it becomes pharaonic. This is one of Egypt's habits. Foreign things enter, are transformed, and then appear as if they had always belonged. The Hyksos, rulers of parts of northern Egypt during the Second Intermediate Period, have long attracted exaggeration and misunderstanding. They are often associated with people of Western Asiatic origin who established power in the Delta. Later Egyptian tradition remembers them negatively, as foreign disruptors. But the archaeological picture is more nuanced. Their rise likely involves migration, settlement, trade, and political fragmentation as much as invasion. Scholars still debate the details. What matters is that their presence shocks Egyptian memory and helps shape the militarized energy of the new kingdom that follows. Egypt's empire is partly born from the trauma of having been ruled, at least in the north, by outsiders. Libyans to the west are another recurring presence. Sometimes they appear as enemies in royal inscriptions, sometimes as migrants, mercenaries, settlers, or eventually ruling groups. By the Third Intermediate Period, Libyan-descended dynasties hold power in Egypt. Once again, the old boundary between Egyptian and foreign becomes complicated. People first depicted as outsiders can become insiders. Names, dress, titles, and customs shift. Identity in ancient Egypt is real, but it is not frozen. The Mediterranean opens still more connections. Minoan and Mycenaean objects, Cypriot copper, Aegean artistic influences, and later Greek presence all show Egypt's northern links. In the New Kingdom, foreign goods appear in elite tombs and palace contexts. Some are diplomatic gifts, some are trade goods, some are imitated locally. A painted jar or metal vessel can carry across the sea not only material value, but style, prestige, and curiosity. Egypt influences others and is influenced in return, though its official ideology rarely admits dependence. Punt remains one of the most evocative foreign lands in Egyptian imagination. Expeditions to Punt bring incense trees, myrrh, ebony, ivory, gold, animal skins, baboons, and exotic goods. Reliefs from Hatshepsut's mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari show the famous expedition in rich detail, including ships, cargo, trees, and the people of Punt as Egyptians chose to represent them. The exact location of Punt remains debated, with possibilities often placed around the southern Red Sea region, including areas of the Horn of Africa or nearby coasts. No single explanation has settled the matter fully, but the fascination endures because Punt is both real and dreamlike, a trading partner turned sacred geography. Foreigners inside Egypt are not all prisoners or diplomats. Some are soldiers, servants, labourers, craftsmen, traders, interpreters, wives, musicians, and administrators. Egyptian art often marks foreigners with distinctive clothing, hair, beards, skin tones, or names, but real life is more fluid than artistic categories. People can settle, marry, serve Egyptian institutions, adopt Egyptian customs, or maintain separate identities. The record tends to preserve them when they matter to administration. War or elite display, countless ordinary migrants vanish into the population without monumental announcement. There is a darker side to contact captivity. War brings prisoners who may be settled as labourers, servants, soldiers, or temple dependents. Royal inscriptions boast of bound enemies and captured peoples. The image of foreigners kneeling beneath Pharaoh's feet is repeated because it performs Egyptian order. Yet each captive is also a displaced human being, removed from a home, language, and kin network. Egyptian civilization is not made gentler by its beauty, like other ancient states. It can be violent, extractive, and proud of domination. At the same time, Egypt absorbs foreign gods and lets its own gods travel. Deities such as Bez may have complex origins and associations reaching beyond Egypt. Levantine goddesses and gods enter Egyptian worship in certain contexts. Especially during the New Kingdom, Egyptian deities spread outward through trade, diplomacy, empire, and later Mediterranean religious life. Isis, in particular, eventually travels far beyond Egypt, becoming one of the great deities of the ancient Mediterranean world. The gods are more mobile than borders. Trade goods reveal desire. Incense matters because temples need fragrance for divine presence. Lapis lazuli matters because its deep blue evokes heavens and luxury, even though it comes from distant sources through complex networks. Cedar matters because Egypt's trees cannot provide enough of that quality for all elite needs. Silver, rarer than gold in Egypt for much of its history, carries special value. Horses and chariots reshape elite warfare. Foreign servants and musicians add prestige. Exotica helps rulers display command over the edges of the known world. But imported goods also reveal dependence. Egypt may imagine itself as complete, yet it needs what it does not have. The desert protects, but also deprives. The Nile feeds, but does not provide every metal, timber, scent, or stone. This is one of the quiet contradictions of Egyptian power. The kingdom celebrates its ordered separateness while constantly reaching beyond itself. As the sun sets over a border fort, an Egyptian scribe may record deliveries from the south. At a delta harbour, sailors unload goods from the Mediterranean world. In a palace, a foreign princess learns the rhythms of an unfamiliar court. In a temple, incense from distant lands rises before a god carved in Egyptian stone. On a battlefield, chariots thunder with technology once foreign and now royal. Beyond every edge of the Black Land, roads continue. Ancient Egypt survives in memory as a world apart, but its history is braided with outsiders. It is shaped by Nubian gold, Levantine timber, Asiatic rulers, Libyan chiefs, Red Sea voyages, Mediterranean trade, desert nomads, foreign gods, and imperial wars. The deeper one looks, the less Egypt resembles an isolated miracle. It becomes something more interesting, a civilization that guards its identity fiercely while borrowing, fighting, trading, marrying, fearing, and learning from the worlds around it. Collapse rarely arrives as a single clean event. It comes first as delay. A shipment of grain is late. A canal is not cleared as carefully as it once was. A governor acts like a king in miniature. A temple estate grows rich while the palace grows anxious. Soldiers expect payment. Workers complain. Floods disappoint. Foreign groups press at the edges. Tombs are entered by people who know exactly what they are looking for. Official inscriptions continue to speak of order, victory, and divine favour, but beneath the language of permanence, the joints of the system begin to creak. Ancient Egypt does not collapse once. It transforms, fragments, recovers, and transforms again. This is one of the reasons its history can be misunderstood. A civilization that lasts for roughly 3,000 years is not a single continuous golden age interrupted by one disaster. It is a long sequence of kingdoms, intermediate periods, reunifications, foreign rules, reforms, restorations, and losses. The Old Kingdom gives way to fragmentation. The Middle Kingdom rises after crisis. The New Kingdom expands into empire and then weakens. Later periods bring Libyan, Nubian, Assyrian, Persian, Greek, and Roman domination. Egypt persists, but it is never untouched. The Old Kingdom's weakening is often linked to several possible pressures: long reigns that complicate succession, growing power of provincial officials, strain from royal building projects, changes in administration, and climate stress affecting Nile floods. Scholars still debate the balance. A series of low inundations may have contributed to famine and instability in some regions, but environmental stress alone does not explain everything. States collapse when stress meets vulnerability. A bad flood year is dangerous. A bad flood year in a system already politically strained is worse. The image of famine haunts Egyptian memory. Texts from later periods sometimes describe chaos, hunger, the poor becoming rich, the rich becoming poor, graves violated, and society turned upside down. These writings may be literary, ideological, or retrospective rather than straightforward journalism. But their emotional truth matters. Egyptians fear reversal. Mart depends on things remaining properly arranged. Collapse is not only administrative failure, it is the world losing its categories. During intermediate periods, local power becomes more visible. Regional rulers, nomarchs, and competing dynasties fill spaces where central authority weakens. This does not mean ordinary life stops everywhere. Fields are still worked, children are born, pottery is made, and local elites continue to sponsor tombs and temples. Collapse from the palace's point of view may look different from life in a village that still has grain and water. The evidence remains incomplete. And one must be careful not to imagine the entire country falling into darkness at once. Egypt's crises are uneven. The New Kingdom's decline carries a different tone because it follows imperial grandeur. Egypt has projected power into Nubia and the Levant, built enormous temples, filled royal tombs, and presented Pharaoh as master of foreign lands. But empire is expensive. Garrisons, diplomacy, campaigns, tribute systems, and monumental building all require resources and coordination. When external pressures rise and internal systems weaken, the cost of greatness becomes heavy. The late Bronze Age world beyond Egypt is also shaking. Around the eastern Mediterranean, major powers and cities face disruption, destruction, migration, economic stress, and political change. The so-called Sea Peoples appear in Egyptian records as part of this broader upheaval, though their exact identities, origins, and movements remain debated. Egyptian inscriptions under Ramesses III describe battles against foreign groups by land and sea, presenting Pharaoh as defender of order. Egypt seems to survive these confrontations better than some neighbours, but survival is not the same as recovery. The effort may have strained an already burdened state. At home, the end of the 20th dynasty reveals deep trouble. The village of Deir el-Medina records delayed rations and worker strikes, showing that even skilled royal tomb workers could be left without proper supplies. This is not a minor inconvenience. These workers are attached to one of the most sacred royal projects in Egypt, the tombs of kings. If they are not being fed reliably, something serious is wrong in the distribution system. The strike is one of history's most vivid reminders that sacred labour still depends on bread. Tomb robbery becomes another symptom. Royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings are not robbed only by ignorant outsiders. Investigations from the late New Kingdom reveal organised theft, corruption, official involvement, and desperate opportunism. The dead kings, once guarded by theology, stone, seals, and fear, become sources of metal and luxury goods in a strained economy. The violation is practical and symbolic at once. When the ancestors of kings are no longer safe, royal eternity itself has lost political protection. Corruption appears in the records not as an abstract moral failing, but as a working reality. Officials may steal, hide, collaborate, take bribes, or fail in their duties. Temples hold vast wealth. The priesthood of Amun at Thebes becomes enormously powerful, sometimes rivaling royal authority. The balance between palace and temple shifts. Egypt's system, built to integrate religion and kingship, can become unstable when religious institutions accumulate too much independent power. No single explanation fully accounts for the New Kingdom's decline, but administrative weakness, economic stress, external pressure, elite competition, and changing military realities all form part of the pattern. Climate may also play a role in certain periods. Nile flood variability affects food production, and wider climate shifts can contribute to drought, famine, migration, and instability around the eastern Mediterranean. But climate is never a simple puppet master. Societies respond differently depending on storage, leadership, inequality, trade networks, and resilience. Egypt's long history is partly a history of managing environmental uncertainty. Collapse comes when management fails, or when too many problems arrive together. Foreign rule does not mean Egypt disappears. This is crucial. Libyan-descended rulers can adopt Egyptian royal forms. Nubian kings of the 25th dynasty present themselves as restorers of Egyptian tradition, building temples and honouring Amun while ruling from a power base to the south. Assyrians invade, Persians rule, Alexander arrives, the Ptolemies, Greek-speaking rulers, adopt Egyptian kingship and build temples in traditional style, even while governing within a Hellenistic world. Rome eventually turns Egypt into an imperial province. Egypt's political independence fades, but Egyptian culture continues, adapts, and reappears in new forms. This is why collapse may be the wrong word if used too simply. Egypt is less a body that dies in one moment than a river changing channels. The pharaohs lose power, regain it, lose it again. Languages shift, scripts change, gods merge, travel, or decline. Temples continue rituals under foreign rulers, villagers still farm the Nile, priests still carve hieroglyphs centuries after older royal greatness has gone. The civilization becomes layered with its own afterlives. Still, there are real endings. Native pharaonic rule ends. Hieroglyphic literacy eventually disappears. Temples close. Ancient cults are suppressed or abandoned in the late antique world. Tombs are emptied, reused, forgotten, or quarried. Statues fall. The knowledge needed to read the old signs is lost for many centuries. Egypt remains inhabited, alive, and culturally rich, but ancient Egypt as a living religious and political system passes away. The consequences are immense. Later peoples inherit ruins without always understanding them. Greek and Roman visitors marvel at monuments already ancient to them. Medieval communities reuse stone. Early travellers collect stories. Modern archaeologists arrive with curiosity, ambition, and sometimes destructive methods. The ancient collapse becomes a modern mystery because the chain of memory has broken. When the writing can no longer be read, the monuments become silent giants. At sunset, the ruins of a once powerful temple can look peaceful, but that peace hides the long violence of time. Columns stand without roofs, reliefs are cut by later hands, smoke stains may mark reuse, sand gathers in corners where priests once moved with incense. A carved pharaoh still offers mat to a god, forever repeating the gesture, though the temple economy that made the offering meaningful has vanished. Ancient Egypt's collapses teach a slower lesson than catastrophe myths allow. Civilizations can endure astonishingly long and still remain fragile. They can build in stone and depend on mud. They can call their order eternal and depend on grain deliveries. They can defeat enemies and be weakened by accountants, drought, corruption, and delayed wages. They can preserve bodies for eternity while failing to protect tombs for a few generations. The Nile continues through all of it. It flows past strong kings, weak kings, foreign kings, priests, robbers, farmers, soldiers, and tourists not yet born. It does not preserve the state, it only makes life possible. What people build on that possibility can rise magnificently, and then, slowly, come apart. After ancient Egypt loses its last native pharaohs, it does not vanish. It becomes a memory living inside other people's worlds. Greek rulers wear Egyptian crowns. Roman emperors appear on temple walls as pharaohs, offering to gods whose language they may not speak. Priests continue rituals in sanctuaries that are already old beyond imagination. Villagers live beside monuments whose builders are distant even to them. Tombs are robbed, repaired, reused, forgotten, and entered again. Egypt after Egypt is not an empty ruin. It is a long afterlife. This afterlife begins while the old civilization is still breathing. Egyptians themselves reuse monuments, move statues, quarry older buildings, restore temples, erase names, and copy ancient styles. They are not frozen worshippers of an untouched past. They constantly reshape memory. A king may build with blocks taken from an earlier king. A later ruler may carve his name over older work. A temple may preserve traditions that are already centuries old while also responding to present politics. Egypt is ancient even in antiquity, and Egyptians know it. When Alexander the Great enters Egypt in 332 BCE, he steps into a land with a long tradition of absorbing foreign rulers into Egyptian kingship. The Ptolemies who follow him are Macedonian Greek by dynasty, but in Egyptian temples they appear as pharaohs. This is not mere costume, it is political necessity and religious strategy. To rule Egypt, they must support temples, honour gods, and participate in the visual language of kingship. Cleopatra VII, the last famous Ptolemaic ruler, belongs to this Hellenistic world and to Egypt's pharaonic tradition at once. Her story is often reduced to romance and tragedy, but the deeper fact is political. She stands at the meeting point of Egyptian kingship, Greek monarchy, and Roman expansion. Under Rome, Egypt becomes an imperial prize. Its grain helps feed the empire. Its monuments attract travellers. Its gods travel across the Mediterranean. Isis becomes especially powerful beyond Egypt, worshipped in places far from the Nile. Egyptian obelisks are carried to Rome, where they stand as trophies, solar symbols, and imperial decorations. The ancient signs carved on them are admired long after their meaning is lost. Stone continues speaking, but no one nearby understands the language. Temples remain active for centuries, though the world around them changes. At Philae, worship of Isis continues deep into late antiquity, making it one of the last strongholds of traditional Egyptian religion. Hieroglyphic inscriptions continue there very late, including some of the final known examples, but eventually the old temples close, Christianity spreads, and the sacred landscape is transformed. Gods who had received offerings for millennia fall silent in their houses. Their images remain on walls, but their daily rituals cease. This is one of Egypt's most profound endings, not the fall of a city, but the stopping of repeated acts. When hieroglyphic knowledge disappears, ancient Egypt becomes mysterious in a new way. The monuments are still visible, but their words are locked. Later visitors see birds, snakes, eyes, and seated figures, but cannot read the names, prayers, boasts, and instructions. This silence allows imagination to grow wildly. Egypt becomes a land of secret wisdom, magic, hidden science, and invented meanings. Some of these fantasies are beautiful, many are wrong. The evidence remains incomplete for later receptions of Egypt in every period, but one pattern is clear when a civilization cannot speak for itself. Others speak over it. Medieval and early modern travellers encounter ruins with awe, curiosity, and confusion. Some monuments are reused as quarries, some are visited as wonders. Mummies become objects of trade, medicine, collecting, and spectacle. This part of Egypt's afterlife is uncomfortable. Preserved bodies, once prepared for eternal identity, are ground into pigments, displayed in cabinets, unwrapped before audiences, or sold as curiosities. The modern museum world inherits both knowledge and damage from this hunger to possess the past. The decipherment of hieroglyphs changes everything. With the Rosetta Stone and the work of scholars who compare Greek, Demotic, hieroglyphic, and Coptic, the old language begins to return. The process is difficult, competitive, and gradual, but its consequence is enormous. Egypt is no longer only a mute civilization of stones, it becomes readable. Kings regain names, officials regain careers, prayers regain grammar, jokes, lists, spells, and complaints come back into human range. The dead, in a limited but astonishing sense, begin to answer. Modern archaeology then transforms Egypt again, though not always gently. Early excavators sometimes dig quickly, remove objects from context, and prioritise spectacular finds over careful recording. Later, archaeological methods become more systematic, scientific, and attentive to ordinary life. The field shifts from treasure hunting toward understanding settlements, landscapes, diet, disease, labour, technology, climate, and social history. A broken pot, a seed, a worker's note. Or a child's burial may now matter as much as gold. This is one of the great changes in how Egypt is studied. The quiet facts become powerful. Tutankhamun's tomb, discovered in 1922, becomes the most famous archaeological event in Egyptian history, not because he was the greatest pharaoh, but because his burial survived with astonishing richness. The golden mask turns into a global icon, yet the tomb's deeper importance lies in its preserved arrangement of objects: beds, chariots, boxes, shrines, clothing, weapons, food, staffs, jewellery, and signs of hurried burial preparation. It shows not only wealth, but the practical clutter of eternity. The afterlife needed furniture. The popular idea of the mummy's curse grows around this discovery and others, mixing coincidence, journalism, colonial anxiety, and fascination with death. It is a powerful modern myth, but it is not a sound archaeological explanation. Ancient Egyptians did use protective texts and warnings, but the cinematic curse belongs mostly to modern imagination. Still, its popularity reveals something real about the emotional force of Egyptian tombs. People feel that entering such places is not neutral. Even when they reject the curse, though they sense the trespass. Egyptology today faces questions older excavators often ignored. Who owns the past? Where should objects remain? How should human remains be treated? How should museums explain colonial collecting, excavation history, and the removal of artifacts? Scholars still debate many of these questions, and no single explanation fully satisfies every claim. Ancient Egypt is not only ancient, it is modern politics, tourism, national identity, scientific research, and ethical responsibility. New technologies continue to reveal hidden Egypt. CT scans examine mummies without unwrapping them. Satellite imagery detects buried structures and ancient channels. Ground-penetrating radar searches beneath sand and stone. DNA studies, isotope analysis, residue chemistry, and paleoclimate research add new layers of evidence. Yet technology does not make mystery disappear. It often sharpens it. A scan may reveal an injury but not the exact story of death. A buried wall may appear before its purpose is known. A genetic result may answer one question and raise 5 more. The past remains generous and withholding. Some discoveries are still waiting because Egypt is not exhausted. Beneath modern settlements, under fields, in desert margins, in museum storerooms, in untranslated texts, in damaged tombs, and under the sea, evidence remains. Not all of it will be golden. Much of it will be ordinary, and that may be its greatest value. A basket, a sandal, a loaf, a child's toy, a rope, a receipt, a worker's sketch. These can bring the ancient world closer than another royal treasure. Egypt after Egypt is therefore a story of survival through transformation. The civilization loses its old religion, its script, its kings, and many of its cities, yet it remains one of the most present ancient cultures on Earth. It survives in museums, scholarship, tourism, art, film, architecture, national memory, and the global imagination. It survives in misreadings and corrections, in myths and careful science, in gold masks and mud brick walls, in both wonder and responsibility. As the sun lowers over the ruins, a temple wall still shows a pharaoh offering to a god. The ritual has stopped, the language was lost and found again, the roof may be gone, and the world that made the image has passed beyond recovery. But the gesture remains, a hand extends, an offering is made, across more than 2,000 years of silence, reuse, misunderstanding, excavation, and return. Egypt is still doing what it always tried to do: survive by being remembered. The river keeps moving after the last temple falls silent. It moves past broken walls, buried towns, empty tombs, and fields where no one remembers the names once written on nearby stones. It carries no grief that anyone can measure. It simply flows, as it did before the first king, before the first pyramid, before the first scribe pressed meaning into a sign. The Nile outlives every title placed beside it. Ancient Egypt feels eternal because it worked so hard to appear eternal. It carved bodies into stone, wrapped the dead in linen, repeated names, measured fields, watched stars, stored grain, and built monuments large enough to make time seem negotiable. Yet beneath all that permanence was something fragile: people waking in heat, grinding grain, fearing illness, loving children, losing parents, arguing over wages, watching the flood, and hoping the world would hold together for one more season. That may be why Egypt still holds the imagination so tightly. It is grand, but it is also intimate. A pyramid can overwhelm the eye, but a headrest, a sandal, a loaf of bread, or a child's amulet can reach closer. The ancient Egyptians wanted to defeat disappearance, and in some strange partial way, they did. Not completely. Never completely. Most voices are gone. Most houses are dust. Most dreams left no record. But enough remains to show the outline of a world that refused to let death have the final word. The mystery of Egypt is not only what remains hidden under sand, water, or stone. It is how much survives at all. A name carved in a tomb, a worker's note on limestone, a queen's broken statue, a painted bird, a mummy's worn teeth, a city drowned beneath the sea. Each fragment is small against the scale of time, but together they make the vanished world breathe again. And so the final image is not gold, or a curse, or a sealed chamber. It is quieter than that. It is dawn returning to the river. Reeds move in the soft wind. The desert waits beyond the fields. Light touches the water, then the mud brick walls, then the stones built for forever. Somewhere in that brightness. Ancient Egypt is gone. Somewhere in that same brightness. It has never entirely left.